Welcome to Senpai, your new home for immersive manga, manhwa, anime-inspired novels, and fantasy audiobook stories. Here, every episode brings you into a world of overpowered heroes, revenge arcs, cultivation journeys, virtual reality games, monsters, magic, and emotional character moments. Whether you enjoy dark fantasy, action, reincarnation, system stories, or epic adventure novels, Senpai is here to turn every chapter into a cinematic listening experience. So relax, put on your headphones, and let the story begin. Subscribe to Senpai and join the journey.
Julian gave me a questioning gaze. It's hard for me to see, was what my look conveyed. Embarrassed by his little to no good acting, he took a shallow breath and gave a smile. Was he hurt? Should I have commended him? As I was thinking of consoling Julian a bit, the land below us shook a little, and a low rumbling could be heard from the front. The mountain trembled as the rocky wall in front of us opened in a flashy way. I looked to spot someone inside, but what met my eyes was another huge door. This one was made up of metal. I had to give credit. The door indeed looked imposing. With a slight nod of my head, Arthur led the path to the inside of the mountain. As we reached some 10 feet from the door, another translucent barrier appeared before us. Show off. Click. With the sound of some kind of activation, the barrier flickered for a second and then disappeared. We didn't move further. The air inside felt a little hot. Might have been due to the closed space we were in. After what felt like a minute, the mountain entrance behind us closed with a boom. And at the same time, a dozen lights illuminated the inner walls of the whatever we were in. At first, it felt a little blinding for the eyes, but soon the entire view could be seen. The gate before us extended high up, with no end in sight. Don't tell me it was directly connected to the mountain's peak. That was some waste of resources. Why make such a large door if the base is practically inside a fucking mountain? It's hard to understand the psychology of lunatics. All of them, indeed, had a few dozen loose screws. Suddenly, I had a bad feeling about this meeting. My mental health was in serious trouble. Phew. Jokes aside, why the hell hadn't the gates been opened yet? Contact him. I rubbed my forehead in frustration. Wasn't all the show off before enough? Do these lunatics have anything else left to show? As the communicator buzzed, a person spoke awkwardly, and it definitely wasn't number one. There has been a malfunction. Please wait for a moment. It will be resolved soon. Actually, we haven't used the main entrance for a long time, so it seems to have jammed. I was having second thoughts of recruiting these shitheads. Why the hell make us come here? I took a bottle out of my storage ring and gulped it down. That felt good. It's done. Please come in. Please? Where had that arrogance gone now? Looks like it really was a jam. With a thud, the gate opened before us, and inside, a mini battalion of guards could be seen ready to welcome us. I took a step and then walked inside. Arthur and Julian gave a brief glance at the soldiers inside, and then walked beside me. Followed by a little over 50 men, I looked kinda cool. Some researchers waited for us at the entrance, having guilty expressions on their ugly faces. Even these lunatics had some sense of etiquette. But the figure leading them, this fucker, number one, stood with a puffed chest, waiting for us to approach him. I felt like puking just seeing his face. As for his appearance, there's no need to describe him. Let's just keep him as number one. The boss is waiting for you. Follow me. Giving us a brief look, he walked without looking back. I didn't comment on his behavior. More like I didn't have to. Should I cut him off? Surprisingly, it was Arthur who spoke up. I had expected some reaction from Julian, but Julian was just walking with slumped shoulders. What happened to him? Is he upset about something? Relax, we are the guests here. I gave Arthur a meaningful smile. Our walk was a long one. This facility was like a freaking maze. We had nearly made a total of 32 turns, and still the main base was far from us. Didn't these guys have some easier means of transport? The sound of our steps echoed through the narrow hallways, making it feel like some stampede. The guards at the entrance walked on both our sides, each of their hands on the hilts of their weapons. They were quite professional. Even criminals these days have a sense of duty. Truly a refreshing sight to see. After some 20 minutes of walking, we reached what could be called the main part of this facility. The difference was obvious. White lights flooded the entire area, making it look like a bright sunny day. The walls were all painted in pure white and expected development for a research facility. The floor was made of marble with a glassy finish to it. Everything looked premium. I felt like stepping into some billion-dollar global corporation. The meeting room is this way. Number one led us to a quiet corner. Upon reaching the place, he placed his hand on the wall, and a beeping sound echoed. A scanner, perhaps. The wall lifted itself from the ground and got attached to the ceiling like a damn shutter in general stores. These guys. As I made my way into the room, it was filled with all sorts of equipment. There were some beds in every corner of the room and some high-tech machines attached to them. It was creepy. Who assigned such a place for a meeting? As I turned to look at number one, the guy seemed to have vanished from thin air. No, I could see his back around a table. As I made my way towards him, I was stopped mid-track as a pair of greenish-blue eyes stared at me. A man in his 40s stood before me, his frame a little shorter than mine. Being shorter didn't make a dent in his presence. Greetings. What makes you visit my humble abode? The man greeted us with a zero-expression face. Alfred Symer, the Mad Alchemist, stood before us. Worth it. This guy was worth all the hype. I could tell just by seeing his eyes. Those dead eyes, without a ripple of emotion in them. In many ways, he was similar to what I was on Earth. That was what I felt when looking at those greenish-blue eyes. Greetings, my friend. The name's Kael. I smiled at him. No Hanschucks. It wasn't like Alfred would reciprocate. Why damage my ego? Friend, Alfred questioned in the same indifferent tone. It was like talking to a robot, the same monotonous voice. Soon to be friend, if our talks go well. I try to portray my best self. Here, I wasn't the head of DX. I was here as a representative, so there was no need to be cold and distant. I prefer practicality. Alfred looked at me for a second and then turned his gaze toward the other members of my team. His eyes stopped at Arthur for a brief moment. A peak immortal. He didn't seem impressed, just stating the facts. Even Arthur was taken aback by Alfred's nonchalance. It was not every day that one saw a peak immortal at their doors. It was like being in front of a god for mere mortals with low cultivation. But Alfred, despite being weak in personal power, didn't show a hint of fear. Not that I expected him to be scared. On the contrary, it would have surprised me if this guy had been scared in the first place. I must appreciate your skills in keeping your base hidden from the authorities for such a long time. Giving him an amusing look, I continued. Your main base, I mean. Or should I say the headquarters of Lonatu? Alfred didn't reply. He looked at the ceiling, inspecting the intensity of the light being emitted. The base was never hidden. Huh, it's just that my enemies are incompetent. He paused as his eyes focused on me again. Can't blame them either for being born with marbles for brains. That can't be called a lie, can it? So what brings you here, Kael? Frost. Straight to the point, huh? I walked toward the table where number 1 stood, giving him a brief glance before leaning on the table with my hands crossed. Nothing much. Seeing your potential, my boss sent me to recruit you. Boss? Alfred asked as his head turned toward Arthur. He must have assumed Arthur was the leader of my group. I didn't give a proper introduction, did I? Alfred waited for me to speak. We are the members of DX, a sort of hidden organization. You might not know about us, as we have just decided to spread our presence in the world. As for a motive, you could call us the protectors of villains like you. I pointed my index finger at Alfred. Still, there wasn't a single change in his expression. This was getting a little boring. You see, this world is filled with hypocrites, people who love their positions of power. To keep their status as rulers, they subject everyone to follow their rules and laws in the name of justice, and what they call maintaining social order. I had to make some righteous impression of our motive, though it didn't exist aside from fulfilling my own benefits. I mean, this is how you make a pitch, right? You have experienced it yourself, didn't you? A normal scientist wanted to learn more about our world, but stopped from doing so just because some people couldn't approve of his methods. I continued in a dramatic mode, my words filled with emotion or something resembling emotion. You and people like you have been hunted for ages, punished for crimes that never existed. I knew saying these things wouldn't leave much impression on Arthur. Still, I had to begin my pitch with some spicy intro. Hick, SNFF. Huh, I could hear someone sniffing behind me. When I turned to look, the sight was disturbing. Number 1 was crying his eyes out, wiping the tears with the sleeves of his coat. This was an unexpected effect. Am I that talented? Just a few words from me could make someone cry their heart out. Damn, I should have become a motivational speaker. Did I make the wrong career choice? Well, blessing in disguise. I made my way toward the crying fucker cough no. 1 and put my hand around his shoulder in a comforting gesture. I asked what's so wrong in researching. Had you committed any crime? I pressed my hand with greater force, making number 1 look into my eyes. No, you did what every curious child does to satisfy his craving's curiosity. I mean, fool. Is experimenting on a few people wrong if it leads to the collective development of the world? Doesn't matter if those few people were a few million. At the end of the day, those are just numbers. I kept a straight face. I might have looked like a lunatic saying these things. As I quickly swept my gaze across the room, I could see the expressions worn by my supposed teammates. Julian had resigned himself to my determined pitch, and Arthur, well, his reaction wasn't so bad. As for my other soldiers, why were they hiding their faces? Did something happen? Strange. Was it wrong for you to dissect living people and study their bodies? No, it wasn't. I had to continue my pitch. You created hybrids out of the living bodies of various races. That was just grow good. The process doesn't matter. The results matter. A wise man once said, he said many things, and I agree with him. None of you were ever wrong. I puffed my chest a little, showing how disco-proud I was of the achievements of my soon-to-be dogpile eyes. And guess what? My boss has recognized your immense devotion. I sounded like a priest preaching to my subjects. The only difference being it looked less holy and more like some cult. I really hoped to sustain my sanity. My script continued, hoping I wouldn't become a lunatic like them. I wouldn't, right? That was all about our motives. I exhaled a slow breath. Now that I think about it, lying with a straight face is indeed a tough task. So you want me to join you? And for what exactly? I have my own organization with sufficient personnel to cater to all my demands. I can't picture what I would gain by joining hands with you. Also, you seem keen on making me your pawn. Or your organization's pawn. What was it, DX? I didn't interrupt Alfred as he continued his monologue. He sure was talking a lot. I wouldn't call it being a pawn. It's more like a mutually beneficial relationship. Silence. Ha ha ha. Alfred's laughter echoed in the room. Mutually beneficial? And what benefit do I get? Before I could speak, he interjected again. Forget it. What would your organization even gain from me? Lonata doesn't have strong forces like you. Alfred cast a brief glance at Arthur. Your brain is what we need. Specifically, your skills in alchemy. We want a stable base in the legal market of the world. Just ruling from the shadows doesn't give us the wings needed to soar higher. At least that's what my boss said. So you wanted to make and sell some measly potions? And what do I get in return? Was he acting dumb? Huh. So should I take it as your willingness to join us? I grinned. Alfred shrugged his shoulders. You wouldn't come here without studying us, and you might already know about the bounties on my head. I nodded. It's getting tough to procure new test subjects, as it is to sustain our operations. The major powerhouses seem to have reached a breaking point, making every effort to search for me. At first, they had a cautious approach, but now, with rising pressure from the public, stronger individuals are being sent for my execution. Alfred let the truth sink in. And many of my bases have already been destroyed, all the members killed. They didn't leave a single soul alive. Seeing these brutal hunts, many of the other heads surrendered themselves, begging for mercy. Those fools. It was the first time I was seeing some sort of emotional resemblance from Alfred. This emotionless monster was displaying a myriad of emotions before me out of nowhere. It felt like these were his real emotions, like he truly felt the frustration of betrayal. But I knew better. Alfred didn't give a shit about his organization, Lonata or whatever he called it. He made it just to make his work easier. This guy was a hell of a loner. Alfred could work in some cave for years, even without any external support. He was fairly capable of kidnapping people on his own, irrespective of their power and status. Still, the current state he was displaying was like showing me how human he was. That he too felt sadness, anger, and all other emotions like a normal living person. It was to make me think of him as something normal. To make me trust his story and accept the deal. To make me think I was in control, while he used me as a meat shield for his own ambitions. Sigh, this child's funny. Playing with me. He still doesn't know who the real dad is? Though none of them know the location of all other bases, I can only say that Lonatu isn't what it was in the past. Let him speak his mind. Alfred looked at me. Don't be mistaken about it. We have grown weaker than before, but believe me, I still have what it takes to turn this situation upside down. His words slowed. It's just that the price to be paid is tremendous. The gains aren't proportional to the losses I might suffer if I decide to fight back. Alfred's shoulders dropped in defeat, or the fake defeat he wanted to show. I must say, his acting was natural, certainly better than some other person. I smiled in Julian's direction, but seeing Alfred act so human, it was terrifying. His laughter, the pain in his eyes, his inability to push back against his enemies, everything felt so real. As I looked into Alfred's eyes, he gave me a hopeless smile. A smile of someone on the brink of defeat? Huh. He really was a natural predator, acting like prey, waiting for his chance to fuck me. So what would I get in return? Seeing that I didn't reply, Alfred asked again. For an organization at our level, we would surely make a lot of enemies, both officials and criminals, in the black markets. So you would get a stable supply of high-quality subjects and dash. I looked in Arthur's direction. You would also receive our exclusive protection. How about it? Alfred gave an impressed smile. Truly mutual. My saviors. He made a small bow with his head, showing fake gratitude. I take it back. His acting was trash, same as, looks like I need to go the hard way. I rubbed my hair and walked toward a nearby researcher who was minding his own work despite our ongoing conversation. Such diligence. As I approached him, he lifted his head to look at me. What dash? Splurt. A head rolled on the ground. I raised my hand toward the body and resisted the incoming flow of mana essence. Someone at a mortal rank should have been able to sense it, but given that Alfred was a weakling, I made some extra effort. This time, I actively used my own mana to resist the 4 mana essence. The effect was friction created between the two, and my goal? Impossible. This can't be. To make the mana essence visible to the naked eye. Someone like Alfred, with deep knowledge of anatomy, would surely recognize the mana in the air being illuminated by the friction I created. Don't fuck with me. Alfred Symer. Drop the act. My indifferent voice reached Alfred's ears. He seemed to understand something, changing his awestruck look to his original expressionless face. No, this was colder than before. The real him. Those dead eyes now felt more alive, as if they held the deepest secrets buried within. You can control mana essence. Alfred said it more as a statement than a question. I can barely control it, but my boss. I paused, letting the silence stretch. He can do much more with it. From my sources, you were quite interested in harnessing foreign mana essence and using it for your experiments. Those hybrids of yours are still incomplete, aren't they? Without mana essence, they're just frozen corpses, with no way to impart life into them. I had to make Alfred understand what he would lose if he decided to pull any tricks. You don't have to join us if you don't want to. No need to pretend otherwise. I just needed you to know what you'll lose without this deal. Without any way to control foreign mana essence. All of Alfred's projects were merely shells of creativity without life. His life's ambition depended on the very thing I could control at my fingertips. This was my only real leverage against the monster before me. The silence was awkward. Neither Julian nor Arthur knew what to speak, and as for me, I was staring at Alfred's eyes without averting my gaze. Alfred did the same. Dissecting you would surely give me a way to understand the mechanics behind controlling the mana essence. His eyes had pure indifference. He spoke as if it was second nature to him, and it indeed was. Shink. Arthur and all my 50 other men drew their weapons in a fluid action. Alfred's words did look like a provocation, but I am not stupid enough to think of defeating you all, now that you have already entered my base. He looked at Arthur for a second, his eyes wandering down to the sword in Arthur's hand. Even Julian had drawn a dagger, making a poor combat stance. But one thing I'm sure of is to just kill us all. Alfred's eyes became a darker shade of green. Won't it be romantic to burn together? His voice was low, more like a growl. The silence stretched between us. Well, I'm still single, and I looked at Arthur, giving him the signal. In a flash, Arthur was behind Alfred. His sword landed under the latter's neck. I don't plan on dying here with a bunch of old fogies. Completing my sentence, I returned to my usual way of talking. As Kael, Alfred's eyes turned blank, like the life in them had been sniffed out. Then he murmured some words, and his voice was even colder than before. Your dog is a lot stronger than an immortal should be, he stated. I had clearly underestimated your strength. This guy, Alfred touched the blade of the sword on his neck and tried to lower it. Seeing my casual attitude, Arthur let the blade drop by an inch, not letting it go any further down. Arthur, is it? You are much stronger, probably even stronger than a sovereign. I raised a brow. It should have been impossible for someone to compare the power of individuals at higher levels while himself being at a far lower level in cultivation. Not only did Alfred judge Arthur as someone stronger than normal immortals, but he could also somehow tell that the latter was clearly much stronger than even a sovereign. Strange. Did he have some tool to detect something like, how did I notice it? Is that what you were thinking about? Reading my thoughts, Alfred asked indifferently, but there was a touch of amusement in his words. What I am currently wearing is a type of armor that can negate a direct impact on my body by anyone below the rank of sovereign. Though it can only fend off a single attack, it's still a powerful feature. Was this the reason this guy didn't fear Arthur when he saw him with us at the beginning? Was he confident about surviving the initial attack and damaging us before fleeing away if things had gone south? That explained his indifference all this time. And even if the person attacking is a sovereign, the armor will blast itself before being destroyed, thereby damaging the person who attacks me with a force equal to his attack. That was some serious level protection. I really want armor like that. The surprising thing is, he didn't even need to apply force to destroy the barrier. If my guess is right, he should have swung his sword with a speed far faster than what an average sovereign can produce. It was the first time I was seeing genuine appreciation in Alfred's eyes. I think we might now be able to share some common ground. And why the change of heart? I was curious about what he felt. Now I know that you guys aren't all talk. If this guy Arthur has the power to fight against sovereigns on equal grounds, then your boss should be even stronger than him to make such a monster bow before him. I felt a little proud and guilty. Is this how it feels to scam people? It's truly a fascinating experience. Arthur Dimitri, I had heard rumors about you, and it seems they weren't unfounded. So, Alfred tried to walk toward me, but Arthur's sword held him down. As I dismissed my hand, Arthur lowered his blade, and so did the other 50 men in the room. Seeing that he was free, Alfred rubbed his neck where a thin line of blood had appeared, and lowering his hand, he fucking licked it. Goose, are you confident enough to protect me and my research, even if my acts garner a combined assault from all the major powerhouses of this world? He let the words sink in. If you're ready to go to such an extent, then... Alfred's mouth elongated in a creepy grin. You have me. Why did it feel more like a proposal? Don't tell me this guy swings that way. Cough. Well, you don't have to worry about that. You are equally important for us, so it surely isn't in our interest to let you die. Alfred nodded at my words. We will be taking our leave then. A few of my men will be permanently staying here. I hope you don't have a problem with that. Alfred shook his head in affirmation. Also, give me all the details of the remaining bases under your control and inform them of Lonatu joining us. You are now a member of DX, and you would have all the freedom to do your own things. The only people above you would be us three and the boss. I gestured toward Julian and Arthur. You didn't mention who my boss is. That. I was going to first prove your worth, and maybe you would get to meet him in real. For now, you could just call him X. I outstretched my hands in devotion. I had to look a little like some mad follower of my boss. Following myself, I really feel like a narcissist. That M.Y. pose was steady. Alfred looked up as if tasting the name in his mind. X. DX, interesting. His monologue looked a little creepy. Not that I was scared of it. Start working on creating all the potions your members can possibly make, and try to make high-quality potions as well. I began explaining the details. We would have to mass-produce the low-quality ones to attract more customers, but the high-quality ones, or the premium product, should be our main goal. That is where our name would truly shine. And what do you want to make? Should I run it as a company or an alchemist guild? I didn't think of that. What's your opinion? Alfred thought for a moment. It would be better to make it a guild, so we can recruit more alchemists on the surface for mass production and control the premium segment with our own members. Also, guilds have more leverage than some random production company. Well, I will leave it at that. And as for the name, call it. What should the name be? A guild run by Alfred Symer, known as the Mad Alchemist. A suitable name. Symer. The Symer Alchemist Guild. Ain't the name charming? I really do have a talent for everything. Oh, I forgot to mention a condition for our deal. What? This guy. I nodded my head for Alfred to speak. I knew something that he would want, other than what we had discussed, wouldn't be so simple. But if I wanted this man to work for me with all his heart, then I had to keep him happy. At least a little. Not that he would feel the emotion. It's nothing serious. You just have to... What? In the end, things worked out pretty well. Still, seeing everything go so smoothly so far, it was getting a little boring. It felt too easy. My excitement had dimmed. Just kidding. Not that I wanted things to fall apart. It's just that some sort of challenge would have been fun. Now that I had secured Alfred, the foundation for DX had been laid. As for recruiting the other villains, well, you can't expect the boss to do everything. Julian and Arthur can handle the rest. The main issue had been Alfred, so I had to personally make things work here. Now, I could just train for the time being. There are still 2 years before I could enter the academy. And in my current state, I was average. Getting strong in the meantime wouldn't hurt. Sigh. I closed my eyes and leaned back on the seat of my car. Cool, armored car. Yeah, we were currently headed back to Tamyr. Arthur suggested it was better to train there and safer too. Though Alfred was on our side, it wouldn't hurt to keep precautions. And that condition he mentioned, it was a tough one to fulfill and risky at that. Not like I had a choice in the matter. With some planning, I could easily meet Alfred's requirement, but for that, I would have to get a lot more closer to the Veltran Royals. Diana seemed like the only possible choice. TSK. Manipulating people is easy for me, but it was a hassle. I hoped Alfred was worth all the risks I would be taking for him. If not, that guy was in for some serious trouble. Munch, munch. I heard the sound of someone eating beside me. As I opened my eyes, the sight that greeted me was Julian eating chocolates. Huh, since when did chocolates get this crunchy? Pass one to me. I ordered. Not that I like sweets, but as a good boss, I should give company to my employee. Julian made a guarded expression. This bastard. I snatched the sweets from his hand, and while doing so, smack, I slapped the back of his head. Ouch. Boss, that's unfair. Julian whined. Not that I cared. Did I do something wrong? No. It's called educating your juniors. And the doctors always advise against eating such things. I just protected him. Munch, munch. It was awesome. Arthur just observed our exchange. I passed the chocolate to him. Didn't he want to eat? Strange. Then why the hell was he looking at my face? Seeing my outstretched hand, Arthur shook his head and mumbled something, but took the chocolate in the end. Kids, what was that? His voice was too low to hear. Ha, old man. He might have felt shy to take it from me. Ain't I charming? People just misunderstand me. I might be the most selfless guy in the world. 2 worlds. The journey was peaceful, if one ignored Julian's antics. The gates of Tamyr welcomed us with open arms. Given the arms existed. This time, no guard stopped us. Our entry was smooth. Arthur really was a big deal here. Drop me in the market, I said to the driver. If I remember correctly, he was a gold ranker. Quite a talented one at that. Arthur just raised his brow in a questioning gesture. Nothing much. I just want to enjoy a little before my hell begins. My training. There won't be any stops once it begins. Burn to learn. That was what Arthur had said to me when I mentioned training for the next 2 years. Arthur chuckled at that. Sure. And you will be coming with me. I grabbed Julian's arm as the car stopped at a corner of the street. Giving a brief nod to Arthur, I dragged Julian through the market. Let's see. Do you have any place in your mind that we can visit? A place? Yes. There's that dash. Let's go there. I pointed at a stall selling cutlets. The aroma there was tempting. Julian grunted in disappointment as he followed me. Did he have some better place in mind? Well, who cares? Hee 2 plates. The shopkeeper roasted freshly cut meat, adding spices on top. It looked like boar meat. So what are they called? Boar cutlets. 9900. Who? Doing push-ups is a tough thing. I had seen many people doing them with ease. Never knew it was this difficult. My daily routine, now, comprised what Arthur called warm-up in the morning. And by that he meant destroying every unit of energy in my body. Using mana makes things much easier, but the bastard had locked my mana core. I looked at the bracelet-type things on my wrists. These were used to completely block one's mana supply, or, in most cases, reduce it to a near-negligible level. So running for 10 miles combined with the hellish schedule of these push-ups, pull-ups, and whatnot weird exercises left me with no strength. And the interesting part is, this was just the beginning of my training for the day. After the so-called warm-up, Arthur would ask me to swing the sword for the entire fucking day. I mean, has the old man lost his cough? My master might be a very trained fighter, a veteran of the mightiest battles, but I must say, he was shit at training someone. I could understand having me follow this monotonous routine for a couple of days, a few weeks at most. But no, I've been doing these very same things for the entire 3 months. How pathetic can this man get? Though I must admit my physical endurance has increased by a solid margin, and so has my body. Now I could clearly see a well-defined physique every time I glanced in the mirror. My abs were like solid bricks. Even the most elite weightlifters and influencers on Earth wouldn't come a percent near my level. Okay, that was an exaggeration. Still, my body had now grown more muscular and better defined. I could now easily balance myself in any form or posture, and swinging those swords for the entire day had made my wrists. They looked like fucking monsters. My forearms now bulged with veins spreading all across my wrists. It really looked marvelous. Careful. I never said my master was useless at teaching. Or did I? Well, at the end of the day, aside from these improvements, I hadn't learned shit about combat. As for DX, the progress on that front was better than mine. I had given a detailed list of all possible useful villains that we could possibly recruit to Arthur and Julian. And I must admit, these guys were good at their jobs. They had recruited almost 90% of the 1,200 villains whose details I had given them. Yes, the number was huge. And this wasn't even close to all the villains on this planet. You could just imagine the total number of villains in the game. It was ridiculous. Many pro gamers had protested against such absurd logic of the game, but the developers didn't budge an inch. They continued releasing updates according to their own scripts, never bowed under the pressure of the demands in the market. And for that, I must really appreciate them. It wasn't easy to go against the market flow and still create a game that was considered one of the best sellers in the history of gaming. As for the recently recruited villains, I won't mention much about them. Not that I was disrespecting their place in DX, it's just that they were minor villains. Among them, many had caused horrific crimes, and some of them were the ones who were wrongly accused and hunted by the world. It was a dynamic grouping, but I didn't care for the smaller details. No matter their characters or intentions, all these villains, despite having minor roles in the game, were individuals with a good amount of talent. I mean, mostly the people with talent are the ones that go on the path to become evil. The ones with mediocre or no talent just have no right to become a villain. Even a minor one. That's how the world works. To be able to influence it, you need to have a decent amount of power to make people notice you. So in the end, you are either respected or hated. There's no middle ground in such stuff. So, back to the point today, Arthur was returning along with Julian, back to Tamyr. And that meant my real training would now begin. I hoped to have some company while training, and Julian was my first choice. But that fucker gave me some enlightenment about efficient resource utilization. Boss, I would just be a drain on the resources. Better they be used for your growth on my behalf. Sniff, sniff, hick. With immense regret, I must strive to make your dreams come true. So just let me leave. He barked some cringe lines and ran away with Arthur. Though he did his fair share of work, I just couldn't digest the fact of burning alone. Is there no thing as bromance? That traitor. Huh. The sun had nearly dipped down the horizon. I raised my sword in another swing. Every cell in my body was screaming for rest. My clothes were drenched in sweat. I must have smelled like shit. The thought of taking a warm bath reignited my spirits. Boss. Boss. Huh. I could hear a high-pitched voice. I looked around to find the barren land around me. Looking closely, was it Squirrel? The little guy was running with his mouth filled. Sigh. I had just seen a heist in broad daylight. Hurry. Two figures could be seen approaching from the west, and one of them was vigorously waving his hands at me. The traitor was back, and so was my master. Rage boiled in my mind as I took deep breaths to steady my beating heart. Hey, gritting my teeth, I waved in return. There's still time for night to come, so don't stop. Continue. Arthur's not-so-cheering voice fell on my ears. They were beginning to itch, and so were my hands. I badly wanted to slap someone. Boss. Julian cautiously approached me as I stared at him with bright eyes. Huh, what hap dash? Smack. Right swing. Clank. Above. Screech. That was a close one. I eyed Arthur as he stood in the same place, countering each of my attacks. I was currently using mana, so the speed of my attacks was far greater than what I could normally muster. Arthur, on the contrary, had blocked the use of his mana and was relying solely on his physical abilities. I didn't expect the fight to be easy, but I fucking didn't know it would be this one-sided. Sigh. I should have expected such an outcome. Even without his mana, Arthur was someone at the peak of the immortal rank. It should have been a given for his body to be much stronger and durable than mine. I adjusted my stance, keeping my right foot at the back. I preferred it because I could generate a greater explosive force with my dominant foot behind. I didn't move, nor did Arthur. Well, he wasn't going to move anyway. That was one of the restrictions he had put on himself. Though he said it was to make the fight fair for me. I just felt insulted in ways I couldn't describe. I loosened the grip on my sword, and, right side, reaching Arthur, I swung my sword at his right shoulder. He tried to evade without moving from the place he stood, but I changed the trajectory of the blade midway, aiming for his stomach. My lips turned into a small smirk. As the blade was inches away from cutting Arthur's stomach, I gripped the hilt harder, aiming for a powerful strike. Rattle. Huh. Arthur's left wrist had blocked my strike. My sword rattled from the impact. It felt like I'd struck a stone, my sword bouncing away. Damn. My balance swayed from the impact, and before I could steady myself, a kick connected with my core. Boom. I was thrown away like a rag doll. My body came to a stop after hitting the tree behind me. Cough, cough. It tasted like iron as I coughed out a mouthful of blood. You are calculative. I must admit that is your strong forte, but you rely on it too much. I could hear Arthur's advice, but my mind struggled to process any of it. It might have been due to the impact from the attack, or due to crashing into the tree. I didn't know, but my head felt like it was being split apart. Battle isn't about calculations. I have told you before the essence of combat. It's all about killing or surviving. There's no in between. Your calculations stop you from seeing the full picture. I could see Arthur walking towards me. My vision was getting covered by the blood that had spilled from my head. I knew I was alive, still it felt like being dead. It was a strange sensation. When you calculate, your enemy can predict you. Your attacks are swift, but they can be countered if your movements are predictable. Your calculations make your eyes follow the trajectory of your attacks. You might overpower your opponents with your brain, only if they're monsters incapable of deep thought and intelligence. For intelligent creatures like humans, seeing in your eyes lets them know your next attacks. Arthur's voice went soft. Try to use your instincts more. Instincts act before your brain can process your actions. They're unpredictable even for the host, so it's a matter of fact that they throw your opponents into disarray. The wind felt like it had slowed down, so did time. The pain in my head hadn't subsided. It had become even more intense. It's not good to always rely on instincts, but you should at least train your body to be able to create miracles in a fight. One day, it may very well save you from death's embrace. I felt like my soul was getting ripped apart from my body. My thoughts were becoming messy. Cough, cough. More blood spilled from my mouth. You okay? Huh? What was he saying? He was the one who injured me. Cough, cough. I felt pathetic. Being on the ground, helpless to raise my body. I tried moving my arms, but they felt heavy. My back had taken the majority of the impact, but it felt like my head had been hammered. My master sure is a twisted fellow. He could have clearly gone easy on me. Wait, master? What were these pathetic thoughts? Since when had I fallen so low as to call people with respect? If I remember correctly, this guy was supposed to be my subordinate. My dog. Why did I agree to call him master? Since when did I become so lenient? My laid-back attitude towards everything around me. Disgusting. Was this the result of the merger? This body? Kael Frost. It had taken away my true self. I knew something like this would eventually happen, but not to this extent. I had calculated my thoughts being influenced by Kael's soul, but not his soul controlling mine. The merger may have happened, but it was clear that Kael's soul was the dominant one. His memories, his childishness, had made me behave in ways I never would. Remembering the choices I had made till now, none of them were strategic. Had always prided myself on my intelligence. The world had feared me not due to my strength but my mind. Despite being an immortal body, I was compared to the devil, a direct rival of the gods. And what was the guy called? Alfred Symer, the Mad Alchemist, or whatever he was. A clearly unpredictable factor. I negotiated with him, made him accept my offer after making him understand the benefits he could derive from me. Pathetic. Only poison can cut poison. To tame the madman, being a madman myself would have been the right choice. If his body was broken bit by bit, his skin shredded under burning razors, salt rubbed into every cell of his body. What mad alchemist? Even a god would have bent his knees. Since when did I grow this merciful? It would have been interesting to see the mad alchemist bathed in his own acids. With the powers granted by mana in this world, Alfred's body could have been repeatedly healed from death's door. Facing near death every single second, for days and months would the madman sink deeper into madness? My life as X had been longer than Kael's 16 years of life. That might have been the only reason my personality was able to control this body, for my goals to be considered this body's own goals. But it was clear. My mind had been working at a tenth of my true capacity. If not for my strong will to live, I felt like beheading myself for my disgusting acts. Negotiating with filth and calling a person master. And a vermin at that. I looked into Arthur Dimitri's eyes. The impact on my head seemed to have messed with my soul in some way I couldn't yet figure out. Honestly, I didn't care who was in control of this body. At the end of the day, I was Kael, and Kael was now me. But I had to figure out some solution. I needed to ensure that when the time comes, my full power as X should be able to control this body. If I was in some life-threatening battle, there was no way this feeble mind would be able to overpower strong enemies with such measly capabilities. I should be able to take control at times like that. I don't care about enjoying this life, as long as this body survives any and all things. Arthur stepped back as his eyes met mine. I was above everything and everyone, daring to make me call him Master. This mortal shall be punished for his blasphemy. I took a shallow breath. The morning was chilly. I grabbed the sword that had fallen beside me. The arms that were heavy a moment prior felt light as feathers. I slowly stood up. Some light jumps would do the deal. As I jumped, I stretched my hands to the sides, loosening all joints. Arthur observed me with caution. I think the training's enough for today. You should rest and heal those injuries. We will continue the session in the evening. To me, his words meant nothing. Nobody but my own brain could order this body. I felt none of the pain I should have felt from my injuries. Pain was nothing but signals sent by the brain through nerves to inform the body that it was reaching its limits. For me, suppressing such pain wasn't even worth my attention. I was perfectly capable of suppressing those neural signals. Arthur's eyes widened as he saw me stretch my back with ease. There wasn't a hint of discomfort on my face. Don't overextend your body. I didn't reply. I felt the balance of the sword in my hand. Though on Earth, I had never held such a primitive weapon, it was not a difficult thing to do. A weapon is meant to be an extension of one's body. And if you had full control over your body, then by my calculations, it shouldn't be difficult to wield any weapon irrespective of its size, shape, or center of gravity. It's not possible for me to become a sword master just by swinging it a few times. No, that would be arrogance based on stupidity. But I was confident in my neural control to swing this sword to its full potential against my current opponent in the current state of my body. Kael? Hey, are you alright? Answer me. Kael. Arthur's shouts became aggressive. Me not replying must have worried him. If he keeps the same attitude towards people other than me, if that happens, He would be a bigger liability than the value he could provide. I needed to educate this human. Do you take me for an animal? My voice was low. It wasn't indifferent, nor was it cheerful. Arthur must have been caught off guard by the sudden change in my behavioral patterns. Huh. No, why would I dash? Then stop yapping about instincts and all. Arthur's eyes grew serious. No, my head's all right. I clarified the misunderstanding that must have brewed in his head. Though his thoughts were right. I had hit my head, and the person before Arthur wasn't the kid he was used to. I was no longer Kael. That was who I was, or was supposed to be. Honestly, I could no longer differentiate whose existence I currently shared. The merger of souls had blurred the line between the two of us. You said my calculations are worthless in fights against creatures of intelligence. Arthur didn't reply. Huh. I hate disobedience to my core. It twisted my guts when my dogs went wild. I knew the person before me was much stronger, faster, and more experienced than me. But when I think about it, did I have insane physical abilities on Earth? No, I didn't have any special power, and my body was far weaker than my current one. Still, no nation, no government could stop me. I had fought against the entire world and still won. As a mortal in that world, a small bullet could have easily killed me. So the chances of death were far higher there than in this world. The possibility of dying in my previous life was infinitely higher than the chance of me dying here. So fearing someone just because they were stronger than me, it meant nothing. Fighting millions while being mortal and fighting an immortal while being a mere iron core. For me, there was no practical difference. So I saw no reason to feel hopeless before my opponent. Arthur Dimitri, no matter how strong he was. At the end of the day, he bled just like the millions I had killed in my life. As X, and what bled could be defeated. There was no rocket science behind it. No need to waste energy on feelings like fear. The word itself felt disgusting when I was supposed to be on the receiving end. My body, my soul, and my mind were above such a nuisance. This wasn't a life and death situation, nor was I facing some mortal enemy. This was meant to be training, so there was no need for me to go extreme in order to win. But I had to make the man before me realize the limits of his thinking. To be second in command, he had to broaden his horizons. In a battle, every single thing counts. It might be different for someone who's specialized in hand-to-hand combat, while the one wielding a spear may find it different. There was no fixed rule when the only thing one needed to do was to kill. Yes, for me, the essence of combat is to first kill and then survive, not the other way around. I value my life above everything else. But it had to be noted that if one preferred surviving against a strong enemy instead of eliminating the threat, then a wounded animal is far worse than an apex predator. It was my prime rule to never let my enemies see the other day. That would only make my life troublesome. So whenever I fought, I prefer to kill my enemy for sure and then try to make it back, alive. Saving one's life by letting the enemy live wasn't worth the horrible death one may suffer in the future. As for my calculations, they were supreme compared to anything out there in the world. There was no arrogance in it, just pure facts, though I wouldn't deny the use of instincts. But those are for animals. If you need your body to move faster than your mind, then you had already lost the battle. That was my judgment. It may not be suitable for all, but considering the fact that I had lived till date was enough proof. I cracked my neck a few times to loosen the stiffness in my body. Let's spar again, shall we? And you don't have to stand in the same place. You can move as you see fit. Just keep the restriction on your mana. I wasn't a fool. I considered myself supreme. But that didn't mean I was invincible. Being smart didn't mean I could defeat the gods on my whims. One had to know the limits of his body to be able to truly understand his enemies and kill them. My eyes were calm. My breath was steady. I felt my heartbeat, the blood in my body warming for the fight. The previous spar with Arthur had made my mana reserves drop to nearly half of their original level. Still, that was an issue. Even if I had double the reserves, they wouldn't make a dent in the defense of the person before me. I don't think this would be a good idea, but Arthur looked into my eyes. You wouldn't listen to me anyway. Sigh. Let's do it then. The condition stays the same. Make me bleed, even for the drop of my blood. Arthur said in a defeated voice. Yes, defeating him in my current state was near impossible. Not totally impossible, but that would require me killing myself in the process if the need ever arose. And how would I kill one of the strongest people to ever walk on this planet? As I said, if something bleeds, they can be killed, even if it's a god. But there would be so many conditions to be fulfilled to make a plan potent enough to slaughter Arthur Dimitri. You strike first. Arthur raised his hand, fingers pointed in my direction. I walked towards him. Snap, crunch. The twigs cracked under the weight of my feet. Arthur observed me. Silence. I stopped a foot away from Arthur, staring into his eyes. He met my gaze with determination, not breaking eye contact. Neither did I. But soon, a light frown appeared on Arthur's face. He blinked once as if stepping back. Swing. I moved my sword with precision, directly aiming for his neck. Arthur's reaction was equally fast. He reacted to block my strike. Clank. I put my right foot forward, switching my stance, and rotated my body. The sword moved in a circle before aiming for Arthur's legs. Arthur stepped back, narrowly dodging the blow. No, that wasn't the exact description. His movements were slow and fluid. It felt like he avoided my attack by a hair's margin. But I could tell he was using the least movement possible. He wasn't limiting his strength, On the contrary, this was the most efficient utilization of one's stamina, not wasting a single movement. I prefer to fight this way, but Arthur had a choice. I didn't. He was physically stronger than me. I had to use every ounce of my power just to follow his movements. Before I could execute the next move, Arthur's sword came down from above. Screech. My blade glided against his sword, creating friction. Sparks. Bending down, I balanced my body on my right hand and raising my left foot, an upper side kick to the neck. Bam! Arthur blocked my kick with his left hand. Expecting it, I used the block kick as a base to twist my body midair. My right foot came in a spinning kick. I directed it at the other side of his neck. Arthur's right hand held his sword, while his left hand was occupied. Swoosh! Arthur bent his neck backward, avoiding the kick. Before I could react, he grabbed my left leg and, boom, slammed me into the hard ground. Cough. Blood spilled from my mouth. But my aim stayed the same. The sword in my right hand moved toward Arthur's chest, who was dangerously close to me, holding my leg. Clank. He deflected it. Again, I moved the sword in a horizontal slash. Arthur tried to let go of my leg to avoid the attack, while slashing the sword his right hand at the same time, aiming for my core. But I didn't panic. I yanked my left leg and pushed down on Arthur's hand with force. Reflexively, he tried to lift my leg again. That was what I wanted. Using the opposing force, my body soared into the air, my right foot slamming under Arthur's jaw. Crack. Arthur must have suffered damage as he stumbled backward, but it was my foot that cracked under the pressure. His body was tough, but so was my regeneration. My body began to heal as I charged toward Arthur. Out of his momentary shock, he bent down and threw his sword like a projectile. I sidestepped. Swoosh. The sword grazed my cheek. That was close. Slow. Arthur's voice fell on my ears. My eyes widened, as he had already closed the distance. I tried to dodge his charge, but he grabbed me by the waist and lifted my body from the ground. Losing my footing, I elbowed him in the back. Thumb. He didn't budge. I twisted my wrist, directing the trajectory of my sword toward his collarbone. But before the blade connected, Arthur spun my body and sumo slammed me. Thud. Huh. His body pressed against me as I was pinned down. I could feel a smirk forming on Arthur's lips. He won. At least, that's what he thought. But did he? I grabbed Arthur between the legs and flipped him. Bam! His body crashed onto the ground, directly above my head. Arthur didn't let it affect his awareness. He immediately leaped toward his sword that had landed a few meters away, trying to retrieve it. I grabbed my sword from the ground and charged toward him. Arthur had already sensed me. His movements became faster. With a roll, Arthur grabbed the hilt with his right hand and stood up, his sword aiming right in front of his body, ready to defend against the attack he thought might appear. But, shriek! Arthur's eyes widened as the sword pierced my body, its tip exiting my back. As for my sword, it was directly aimed at Arthur's face with a powerful thrust. Still, as the veteran he was, Arthur moved his neck backward in an inhuman angle. My sword felt like it had failed to reach the target, but I moved forward, letting the blade in my stomach pierce deeper. Spurt. A small hole appeared on Arthur's neck, just beside his voice box. Silence. Kael had grown stronger over the months. Arthur could see the results of the 3-month training. Kael's body had become more sturdy than before. Now, he could keep his body in motion in accordance with his thoughts. Kael hadn't evolved his core, but his presence had grown stronger. Now he no longer looked like a spoiled noble brat. Appearances were necessary up to a certain extent. When you looked strong, people avoided fights with you. That was a necessary deterrent to avoid wasting time on such petty things. Arthur had set some conditions for their spar, limiting his strength to a large extent. Still, Arthur was no less dangerous than before. Kael tried to use every move to at least graze the skin on Arthur's body with his sword, but he failed every time. The spar ended with Kael being thrown against a tree. Arthur felt a little guilty as Kael coughed a mouthful of blood. Maybe he should have gone softer on Kael, but that wouldn't have achieved the desirable results. Kael was stronger than the average kids his age, but he wasn't dominant in his category. He calculated too much during fights, which reduced his speed and the edge of unpredictability. When you fight an enemy for the first time, neither of you knows the full extent of your opponent's capabilities. This unknown factor always plays a key role in deciding victory or defeat. Kael calculated in a way that made his opponents dance on the palm of his hand, and this mostly resulted in the enemy being in the exact same spot that Kael wanted them to be in. But this trick could be used against monsters and people with average combat prowess. When fighting the elites, even a second's delay could lead to your head being decapitated from your body. And Kael's calculations caused him that same delay. So Arthur wanted Kael to calculate less and use more of his instincts. As Arthur began approaching Kael to check on him, he noticed a small change. Kael's eyes had grown cloudy, like his soul was out of his body. At first, Arthur thought it might have been due to the impact, but Kael's presence grew denser with every passing second. It felt like someone was taking over Kael's body, changing the very nature of his soul. To make things clear, Arthur gazed into Kael's soul, but found no changes in it. The soul had stayed the same. Before he could make a move, Kael raised his head to look into Arthur's eyes. Arthur felt a shiver, however small it was. It wasn't from fear. No, it felt like staring into something you shouldn't have. The feeling wasn't oppressive, but it was there. The one you feel when fighting monsters of the highest ranks. It couldn't be described, but it was there. And, with it, Arthur could also see those dead black eyes. The darkness in them seemed to have come alive. When Arthur had first met Kael, he had felt something similar. But at that time, the feeling was more like the darkness that was hidden in Kael's soul. Now it was similar to a living entity. It was no longer an abstract concept, but the actualization of that darkness. Was this Kael's true self? Did he awaken it with the injury that Kael suffered? I think the training's enough for today. You should rest and heal those injuries. We will continue the session in the evening. Arthur said what he felt was the best thing to do. Kael didn't seem in the best state of mind. Kael's eyes held disregard for everything around him. Arthur knew the kid the man before him was Kael Frost. But somewhere deep inside his conscience, he felt uneasy. He felt like he should help bring Kael out of whatever state he was currently in. But another part of him felt like he shouldn't touch things beyond his station. Still, he had to try. Don't overextend your body. Arthur's voice was softer than before, but it was met with indifference. No, that wasn't the right word. Kael wasn't indifferent. He was simply engrossed in his own world. Arthur observed as Kael inspected the sword in his hand. It was strange. A moment prior, Kael was sparring with him using the same sword, but now he looked at it like it was something new. Something he had touched for the first time. Kael balanced the sword in his hand and then, after some thought, held it in his right hand. Though the change was minor, Arthur felt it. Kael's center of gravity had changed. His posture felt like he was in complete control of his body. Before, Kael used the sword as a weapon to wield. Now it felt like the sword was an extension of his body. The difference wasn't visible enough for a normal person, but for Arthur, it was like heaven and hell. Even many veterans of war failed in the very way they wielded their weapons. They used them as tools to fight. But in reality, weapons were meant to extend the reach of your body to strike at places where your hands couldn't reach, to increase your movements and unpredictability. Fighting with your hands and body was the best thing, but after some time, it would soon reach its potential. That was where weapons came into effect. Such a simple thing, but easily ignored. Even if taught, people couldn't understand the difference between wielding it and making it your own. But Kael had somehow changed his way of fighting moments after the spar. Such sudden enlightenment shouldn't have been possible for even the most gifted people. Let's spar again, shall we? Kael wouldn't budge to rest no matter what Arthur said. So, having no choice, Arthur felt it was time to educate Kael again. Little did he know, he would be the one educated. Spurt. Kael's sword made a wound on Arthur's neck despite him trying to evade the blow. He had underestimated the level of Kael's will to win. Kael had purposefully pierced his body with Arthur's sword to hold it in place before proceeding with his attack. Kael's regeneration wouldn't allow him to die. An effective use of all his cards. For an outsider, the battle may have felt like some trading of blows, but Arthur knew better. Arthur had attacked Kael according to the latter's plan. It wasn't like Arthur couldn't see through Kael's trap. No, that would have been pathetic. Kael's plans were like traps Arthur knew he was walking into, but had to respond in kind due to the nature of the situation. Each blow was tailored, planned in a way that Arthur would counterattack only in specific patterns. It felt like a lie to hear, but that was the reality Arthur had to accept. Instincts weren't everything, nor were calculations. A synthesis between the two was what one could call the basics of a fight. I won. It wasn't easy. The man before me was a monster in his own right. He had seen through all of my tactics but still proceeded with them. If it was someone else, the fight could have ended much earlier. I had defeated him, but that was merely a small hole in his neck. What I wanted to deal was a life-threatening injury to make him take me more seriously. But even I had to know the limits of my current body. If defeating Arthur were this easy, then he wouldn't have survived till now despite being a mere immortal. Yes, an immortal was one of the highest possible ranks in this world. Not many people had reached it, but still, compared to the total population, there were a number of immortals. And then there were beings stronger than them. The sovereigns. Arthur had not only survived in this world, but he had done so by offending most of the major powerhouses of the world. And despite all that, he was here, alive. I stared into Arthur's eyes for a second before moving out of the area. No discussions were needed. I needed the man before me to understand something, and I hoped he had learned the lesson. Showing things was better than verbally explaining them. The sound of my feet echoed as I made my way towards my residence. I needed to take a bath. My body felt fatigued from everything that had happened so far. There was no need to overwork if the situation wasn't of importance. Keeping yourself in a prime condition was a thumb rule that I followed. Your death could come at any second, so it was better to be prepared. Thank you. Arthur spoke from behind. His voice was low, but I could still hear it. I didn't reply. The old age might have gotten in my head. Arthur kept muttering. It felt like he was talking more to himself than to me. I had many things to do. The most important being, how could I achieve full control over this body at my will? And how long would this state last? If the past events were analyzed, then the only conclusion I could derive was damaging my head. It didn't seem a proper resolution to the problem, but I felt instinctively that doing so would be able to make me gain uninterrupted control over the body. Kael's childishness and behavior patterns were necessary for me to mix in society, but that didn't mean I had to entertain his stupid acts. Being able to control this body in times of danger was sufficient enough for me. At least for now. A more stable solution could be derived in the future. Thump. HM? Thump, thump. I felt my heartbeat faster. My vision felt like it was being cut with every passing moment. So the effect seemed to have ended. I needed more information to understand the true limit of this state of mind. For now, it was best for Kael's soul to take over, or at least have majority dominance between the two. Thud. I dropped to my knees due to the exhaustion that I felt. It was more of a mental dizziness than a physical one. The pain began to resurface. My head felt like it was being split apart. But this time, I didn't let the pain overwhelm me. I wasn't Kael. I knew how to deal with pain of such mere levels. Phew. I let out a short breath and, that was fucking cool. I had defeated Arthur. It felt more like a question to me than an actual statement. I had won against one of the strongest people in the world. I knew it. There was no talent like mine. I was meant for something great. I knew it from the moment I was born. Not quite. It wasn't like I remembered any of Kael's life. Now that I think about it, does anyone really remember their just born days? No. If I can't remember it, then neither should you. Cough. So where was the bath again? Phew. This felt good. I was currently in a big, old-style bathtub. It was filled with hot water to the brim. I had dipped myself up to my shoulders, and I must say hot baths after some fucking death training were worth it. I felt all my fatigue wash away. The water had some added healing potions in it. Not that I needed them. My body had already healed from all the injuries that I had suffered. As for the fatigue, it was just a way of saying I felt relieved in the bath. As a matter of fact, I didn't really feel any physical fatigue. My muscles felt like they were ready for another session of combat. Cough. Cough. Still, it would have been best if the bath was in the open, under the blue sky. Or was it white? Might be the clouds. Replaying today's battle, I could say with confidence, I'd learn a lot. It wasn't something that could be explained, but I just felt like it. My body now felt more attuned to combat than ever before. It was a feeling of knowing your body, or what it could really do. But I feel some small gaps in my memory. Like, I knew how I won against Arthur, but it felt more like I had seen myself winning against that monster. It didn't feel like I was the one who had defeated him. Strange. Maybe I was overcomplicating the matter. But somewhere deep inside, my gut was telling me I was right. There were indeed some variations in how I fought. It was more like an advanced version of me. Don't tell me I have some hidden last-moment winning talent, the one where the protagonist is about to lose, then suddenly he wins. There's no logic in it, but still it happens. How the hell do they hire such lazy writers? It was time. My core was now on the verge of evolving. Small cracks had begun to appear on its surface. These were so microscopic in nature that they couldn't be seen with the naked eye. Not that I was capable of seeing my own core. It was just that I felt those cracks in my core, like it was ready to change into something stronger. As for the time it took, it had been another month since my first spar with Arthur. We sparred in the morning, and as for the rest of the day, well, that was used for hunting. After my 100th kill, I forgot to count the numbers, but all I could say was that I had killed plenty of monsters. All of them were iron cores. My core had already been ready to evolve from the mana essence that I absorbed after each kill, but Arthur refrained me from evolving the core. He wanted me to get used to fights. Arthur had advised me to make my body so attuned to combat that I should be able to fight someone even if I was asleep. Like, how the hell would that happen? I didn't know, nor would Arthur tell. So I just continued my hunts. And I must say, with every new kill, I could feel my instincts getting sharper. Yes, though I liked being calculative, having some instincts wasn't a bad thing in itself. But the surprising part was that when I agreed to hone my instincts, somewhere deep in my soul, I felt a strong repulsion. The repulsion was so strong that I was going to abandon the thought of doing anything with my instincts. But then again, the repulsion subsided on its own. It was a strange thing. I wanted to ask Arthur about it, but felt it wasn't a wise thing to do. And when I tried to analyze this feeling, it was like my brain refused to understand what was happening with me. Like my brain wasn't my own. So without the help of my genius mind, I couldn't understand anything. Was this the effect of the merger? Did the fusion cause any undesirable effects on my soul? I didn't know, and neither could I investigate the matter. Asking others meant revealing my secret. I wasn't a fool to do that. Arthur had told me to compress the core when the cracks began to form on it. As my core was iron, the most basic core, I didn't have any rings on it. This made the process much easier. Currently, I was sitting in a cultivation room. This thing was specially built for cultivating in case one's core was ready to evolve. The mana in the room was tremendous. Even without my mana control, I could feel it. Each and every particle in the air was surrounded by mana. The cracks in my core intensified as I tried to compress it. As I used the mana in my body to enter my mana core through those cracks, the surrounding mana began rushing into my body to compensate for the deficiency. It was a continuous cycle. Just near, I could feel it. The core had been compressed to the maximum extent possible. Now I just had to give one last push while repairing the core at the same time. Both things had to be done simultaneously. This was what made evolving one's core so difficult. If someone managed to compress the core, but failed to repair the cracks, then the results were obvious. The person could end up with a crippled core, if he was lucky. In the worst case, the cracks might get bigger and bigger, resulting in the core getting destroyed. And the result? Death. A slow, painful, and agonizing death. A core was like the heart of a living being. No, it was something more important than the heart. And imagine if such a thing began to break apart, piece by piece. Knowing what pain awaited them in case one failed the evolution of a mana core, many people were satisfied with what they had. The risk wasn't worth the reward for average people. That was why a large number stayed at the iron core without ranking up. With a higher core, a person could elevate his status in society. More power meant more money and being considered superior to the people below them. But people still curbed their greed and avoided ranking up if they felt their potential lacking. And how could one judge their potential? When you eat food, you know how much more you could eat before your stomach gets filled to the brim. It was the same in the case of a mana core. While reaching the peak state of any core, the person realizes whether his core is capable of handling more mana. Even if the chances of ranking up are low, some people who are ambitious enough take that risk. As for the result, some survive while others. It was a tragic thing, but that was what kept the balance of power in nature. Everything had to have a limit for the world to keep functioning for years to come. As I compressed my core for the last time, massive cracks began to appear on its surface. It was time. I immediately willed the mana in my body to fill up those cracks. Before, I was using mana to fill the core, thereby producing more cracks in the core from the pressure within, similar to inflating a balloon. Now I was doing the opposite. The mana entered the crevices between the cracks and began to patch up the surface of the core. Like muscle cells healing from micro tears after an intense workout. I was compressing the core at the same time, so as to even out the surface. It was like filling cement in a cracked ball, while also compressing the ball for it to retain its former shape. Mostly a sphere. That was what the mana core looked like. At least in most living creatures, the cracks began to fill up. My mana reserves were being drained at an alarming rate. Within a minute, about 75% of my mana was already used. I willed the mana in the room to refill my reserves. The mana kept entering my body, but it wasn't enough. It was requiring such insane amounts of mana normal. It had to be noted that the mana control of an average iron core was almost negligible. The person could control the mana in his body up to a certain extent during fights or while cultivating, but absorbing the mana from the surroundings at the rate my body was currently undergoing, it was impossible. I was actively willing massive amounts of mana to enter my body. The mana wasn't just being absorbed into my body, I was forcing it to merge with my body. My mana reserves were being filled at faster rates, but so were they being used up, and, the cracks that should have been filled were beginning to expand again. Not only were the cracks expanding, but so was my mana core. I had compressed it to the maximum extent, but now the mana from my reserves was entering the core again, along with being used for patching the cracks. Why? This shouldn't have happened. Did I mess up something during the compression stage? No. As far as I remembered, I had followed each and every piece of advice that Arthur had given me to its maximum application. Damn, I couldn't even call for help. That would be more dangerous than whatever was currently happening with me. I couldn't distract myself. I had to maintain my focus on the core and the core only, and even if I wanted to call for help, I simply couldn't. Arthur had gone to the main base of Lanatu. Alfred had found something of value and wanted to conduct some experiments. As for that other guy who was Arthur's supposed right hand, what was his name again? David Bruth. According to what Arthur had told me, this guy had ranked up to become a diamond core. He could have advised me in Arthur's place, but David, along with Julian, had left a few days ago to recruit another pillar for DX. Damn, does Lady Luck hate me? Calm down. There had to be some solution to this. Think. Firstly, what could have made the core unstable again? I was doing everything according to the rules, except, the mana essence. I had increased my natural mana essence by absorbing it from the monsters that I had killed. And what did that mean? It was obvious. My core would need more mana to be compressed than its former self. Not only had the quantity of my mana essence increased, but also the density of the essence. But why was the core unstable right now? I should have required more mana for compressing the core from the start. Why now? Sigh. I didn't have time to think on a deeper scale. I took a deep breath and used my mana control to the maximum possible level. I might not have the full understanding of the situation, but I knew one thing for certain. I had to stabilize my core. The faster, the better. A vortex began forming around me as massive amounts of mana was being absorbed into my body. At first, I was just willing more mana to enter my body, but the pace was average, at least by my standards. Now, the pace of absorption was unlike anything before. The entire mana in the room began flowing toward me. As I had said earlier, the room had a high density of mana. So when the entire mana in the room flowed in my direction, it created friction between individual mana particles. As for the result of the friction, it wasn't the best. CRZZK. Sparks began to originate in several places. I didn't stop. Not that I could. I willed more mana to enter my body. My mana core had swelled to almost double its original size, and it continued to grow. As for the cracks, a spiderweb had formed on my entire core. At least that's how it felt. The cracks had enveloped the entire core, leaving no place unturned. And they didn't stop. The previous cracks had begun to deepen. It was like even the cracks were being enhanced with the mana my core was juicing out of me. With each passing second, my mana reserves dwindled to the lowest and were immediately refilled by the mana in my body. And my body kept absorbing greater amounts of mana from the surroundings to compensate for its loss of mana. Just when I thought the cycle would end, it just got more wild. Creak. CRNNKKK. The walls in the room began to break apart from the vacuum created by me. KRRRKK. How? Around 90% of the mana in the room was absorbed into my core with no signs of stopping. And like a looming devil, the pace increased. Boom, rumble. The walls fell apart with a deafening sound. The structure around me had collapsed, but my core, more. It continued its dinner. The sparks soon turned into fire. The entire place went ablaze. The soldiers nearby began rushing toward the direction of the collapse. Panic shouts could be heard. More and more soldiers poured in, trying to extinguish the fire. As if that was easy. The fire had been caused by friction between mana particles. Normal water couldn't stop it. My mind had stopped registering the chaos that was unfolding around me. I was in a state where the only thing my body responded to was the absorption of mana. Nothing else. When would it end? My brain was feeling numb from the exhaustion of repeatedly controlling such vast amounts of mana. It was not the control that was affecting my brain, but the speed at which everything was taking place. Before the cells in my brain could rest, more of my willpower, more of my focus was used to feed my mana core. And just when I began to lose my focus, the absorption slowed down. The absorption had finally slowed down. It didn't stop, but the rate of absorption had reduced to more than half of its previous pace. I could feel that my core had stopped expanding as well. Still, I couldn't rest. I began using the mana to actively compress the core again. This time, the quantity of mana required was little compared to the monstrous amount required for the expansion. I felt a little uncomfortable while trying to compress such a large core. Due to the unexpected expansion, I could feel that the size of my core had become almost 5 times its original size, and compressing it had become much more difficult. The resistance from the core was massive. It felt like trying to compress a football tightly packed with air. But I wasn't nervous. Even average people with some talent could rank up from iron to bronze core. So me failing in such an endeavor was amusing. Though the difficulty of the task for me was greater, so was my talent. My potential for reaching the higher ranks had been increased by the ritual, and so had my mana control. I focused all of my willpower on compressing the core. The core began to compress under my pressure. The speed was slow, but there was a noticeable difference with each passing minute. After about 10 minutes of actively compressing the core, it had been reduced to its original size. Now I had to compress it to its limits like before. I didn't stop. The pressure applied to the core also increased with every heartbeat. It was reducing. The size of the core had now reduced to what it was when I had first compressed it. The cracks on the core began to increase. I could have reduced the compression and begun patching up the cracks. But I had a different idea. What if I compressed the core further? It was dangerous. I knew it. Any mistake along the line could completely destroy the core. Compressing it further was akin to asking for death. A far more brutal death than anyone in history had suffered. I thought about it. The core had obviously increased in size due to my unique nature of absorbing the mana essence from the dead. So couldn't I utilize it to my advantage? If the core could expand during evolving something that shouldn't have been possible, then what stopped me from compressing it further than its original limits? The risk was high. Very high. But where there is a risk, there is a reward. The chances of me failing in this reckless attempt were high, but so were the chances of actually succeeding. What I was going to do wasn't normal, but since when had I been normal? If I followed the average route, I would be limiting my growth. The iron core was the foundation of one's power. If I made my foundation stronger than anything anyone in this world ever had, then the result was obvious. My strength would touch ceilings no one had ever reached. A stronger iron core before evolving meant turning it into a much stronger bronze core compared to others. I would have greater mana reserves compared to my peers at the same core rank, coupled with my mana control and absorption of foreign mana essence. Just imagining the future sent an electrifying feeling across my body. I didn't waste any time. Compress. I began applying more pressure on the already compressed mana core, trying to reduce its size to the smallest extent possible. It was becoming increasingly difficult to compress the core any further. The resistance I was currently facing was far more potent than what I had felt at the beginning of this compression stage. What I was doing was putting the mana core under immense stress far more than what it should have been capable of handling. Result, the mana in my body was becoming volatile. Waves of mana started to bounce against the walls of my blood vessels. Much of the mana tried to escape the pressure from within my body. Normally, I should have been able to control it, but all of my focus and the entirety of my willpower were being used to compress the core. Cough. Blood began to spill from my mouth. My eyes began to bleed, and so did my nose and ears. Mana began to leak from my body, creating tears across my skin. The pain from all of it was overwhelming. Still, I didn't stop. More. I used every ounce of my strength to compress the core. The cracks grew more pronounced with every passing second. The core felt like it could burst under the pressure at any moment, but it held barely. Crack. A deep crack spread horizontally across the core. My heart sank. I felt like stopping and entering the last stage of patching up those cracks. But my greed took over. For the last time, I applied tremendous pressure on the core. The resistance was crazy, but so was my will. The core had now compressed to nearly 1/10 of the size of its previously compressed stage. I let out a small breath. In the next moment, I inhaled deeply and controlled the mana to enter my body again. This time, I used the mana to heal those cracks in the core. The core was smaller in size, but the cracks were much deeper. Another vortex appeared across my body, but this time it was smaller compared to before. The rate of mana absorption increased as I continued to patch the cracks on the surface of the core. I willed some of the mana to compress the core simultaneously. The surface of the core began to even out, with most of the cracks being filled with mana. The core had now stabilized. Just some more. I willed more mana to fill the remaining cracks. Time ticked by. Done. The core was now fully healed, with no cracks on its surface. I grew excited for what was to come. The core began to shine. Something close to a brownish light was being emitted from the core. I was ranking up. All the hard work had finally paid off. Though my ability made it easy for me to rank up, the fights that I had to go through just to get used to my body, they weren't easy. I had won all of them, but not without bleeding several times. I might have regeneration, but that didn't make it easy to deal with the pain. The core shined brighter. It had evolved. I was now a bronze ranker. The changes were immediate. I felt my mana reserves had increased by 5 times. Normally, people get double their previous reserves after evolving their core to the bronze rank. This was a massive boost. Large mana reserves meant being able to last longer in battles. They give you the space to use more mana-draining spells in repeated succession without fainting due to mana exhaustion. I also felt like my mana control had increased by a small bit. After ranking up to a new core, people often experienced an increase in mana control. For me, I already had monstrous mana control. This new addition felt like a drop in the ocean, but still it was there. I dusted my clothes, or what was left of them. The fire had burned my clothes, including my skin at many places. My regeneration had repaired the burnt skin, and due to me concentrating on compressing the core, the pain might have subsided into the background. That was a blessing. I was sure no one would enjoy the feeling of being burnt. A sadist maybe, and I wasn't one of them. As I walked out of the room, or what had been left of it, I could see several soldiers surrounding the perimeter. They had extinguished the fire. Mostly, as they saw me coming out unharmed, many of them were surprised but chose not to question it. I was their superior and, who questions the boss? Sir. A soldier thumped his chest with his hand once while saluting me. He had brought a pair of clothes for me. That touched my heart. As I looked at my body, well, my condition wasn't the best. I was almost naked. Almost. I took the clothes from him and wore them over my previous ones. Going to changing room would have been weird. I thought so, and I wasn't keen on changing before them. I looked at the soldiers, most of whom had shocked expressions on their faces. They might have expected me to be half-burnt. I could see that some healers were on standby, but they didn't approach me, seeing my near-perfect condition. We were going to rescue you, but you seemed occupied. The soldier who had provided the clothes spoke up, seeing my gaze wandering over them. They might have seen the vortex of mana around me. A wise choice. I didn't know what would have happened, but approaching a place with such unstable mana wouldn't have been safe, would it? As I patted his shoulder in understanding, the soldier visibly relaxed. Not only him, all the other soldiers let out a breath of relief. They might have been scared of the consequences, not knowing what caused the fire. And everyone here knew I was a high-ranked big shot in DX, the organization their master now served. If the fire had resulted in my death, then their fear was justified. I moved towards my room. I had to get ready, fully armed. I wanted to test my new strength. And what would be better than some hunting? I made my way towards a forest. Should I take someone with me? Some company would have been better. When would Julian arrive? I wanted to flex a little before him. That guy had to take his training seriously. Such a weakling. Achoo. Julian rubbed his nose. Someone might have missed me, he said, looking at the man beside him. Standing at 7 feet, David looked more like a giant. He had a bulky build with shoulder-length gray hair tied in a ponytail. Currently, he was here as Julian's bodyguard. Even Julian was surprised when Kael suggested going with some protection. Julian had thought of receiving some gold rankers. Never in his life did he think of having a literal diamond ranker as his bodyguard. Julian puffed his chest. Who wouldn't be happy being treated like a big shot? Currently, they were in the city of Natsburg, one of the biggest red light districts on the entire planet. The City of Desires. Julian was guarded by around 10 people, all of them gold cores. The people on the street kept giving them glances from time to time. Who wouldn't? It wasn't every day that you saw a literal monster walking around you. David certainly had a magnificent presence. Are any of you hungry? Julian asked, looking sideways. On both their sides, flashy stalls stood tall, selling tempting items. Mainly food. Julian felt like having a little snack before their mission began. No, sir. That would delay our task. Thank you for the offer. David spoke in a polite yet reserved tone. It had been the same since they had left Tamyr. The other gold rankers may have opened up and spoken casually with Julian, but David kept his words short. He wasn't being disrespectful. It was his personality. David Bruth, the second strongest fighter in DX, just below Arthur himself. He was someone who strictly followed the military hierarchy. For him, his superiors were akin to gods, whose wishes were his commands. David would follow every order without a second thought. It didn't matter whether the task was morally appropriate or not. If any of the gold rankers crossed their boundaries while speaking to Julian, David's death stare was enough to freeze their bones. David wasn't rude or inherently bad. It's just that his dedication to the job made him look evil to many, right? He just looked evil, but everyone knew his real self. No one felt offended by his attitude. On the contrary, all the soldiers respected him a great deal. He was an idol for many of them, someone they looked up to, a man they aspired to become. And now David was tasked with Julian's protection by Kael Frost, their master superior. When Arthur had decided to join DX, David was busy. Busy in the sense that he had been focused on evolving his platinum core. Most of the time, he was either in the cultivation room or out in the wild honing his skills. So when he had finally evolved his core to become a diamond ranker, he was met with surprising news. The boss to whom he had pledged his loyalty had now joined some secret organization of unknown origins. David didn't know what to feel about it. At first, he assumed that Arthur was being forced into this organization, so he asked Arthur directly. And the answer he received was surprising, but still expected. A cure for Arthur's daughter, as well as his damaged mana core. Being Arthur's right hand, David knew almost everything he needed to know about his boss. So it wasn't surprising for him to know that Arthur had bent his knee to someone who could cure his daughter. The interesting thing was that such a cure existed, and someone knew about it. David felt it was suspicious, but Arthur reassured him. The silent judge had verified all the claims. David's goals didn't change. If his master had knelt before someone, there was no need for him to stress his mind. Whoever his master served was now David's boss. David didn't have undying loyalty to the new boss, at least not immediately. How could he? He didn't know anything about his new boss except the fact that he was called X, and the other thing being Kael Frost. That kid was a high-ranked member of DX, even above Arthur in authority. Everything was overwhelming for David, but he quickly got used to it. The only thing that mattered to David was serving Arthur. If Arthur had pledged his loyalty to someone else, then he would do the same. There was no hard logic behind it. His new mission was to escort Julian, who was another high-ranked member of DX, the same rank as Arthur. David felt the kid was a little lacking at the start, but to his surprise, Julian had evolved faster than anything he had seen. He didn't grow in terms of power, but David could feel that the kid had changed over the months. Julian no longer felt like some country bumpkin. He now had the presence of someone who was in an equal position of power, similar to his own boss, Arthur Dimitri. The presence wasn't in terms of bloodlust. No, it was more of a personality change. And over the days of interaction with Julian, David was certain of one thing. The kid was smart. His orders were now clearer, more dominant, the signs of a leader. Julian carried himself with grace, unlike how he was when David first met him. It felt like Julian was a born noble. The level of adaptiveness he displayed was beyond what David had ever seen. He changed his colors better than a chameleon, being rough when the situation demanded it. Now, almost all the soldiers knew him as their deputy head. That was because Julian was the one giving most of the orders. Arthur would stand by and listen, giving suggestions when required. As for Kael, he only appeared when the problem was serious enough to warrant his attention. That was the current hierarchy for David. They had arrived in Natsburg for a special mission. It was to recruit a new member for DX. David didn't know what to expect from a meeting. He wasn't a strategist. He only excelled in combat. Everything else was secondary to him. I think it's there. Julian pointed toward another street. They had now entered the main part of the city, the place where majestic buildings stood on both sides. The buildings weren't tall, but they were beautiful. Every part of the street was covered in lights that gave pleasure to many. The houses were decorated from top to bottom, though the decorations weren't what one might imagine. They were suited for the businesses conducted here. Women stood before their respective rooms, calling for people to visit them. "Hey boy, want some snacks?" A woman called out to Julian. Her seductive voice made him blush, but he maintained his composure. As he looked towards her, his control wavered a bit. The woman looked average, but that wasn't what stood out. Her clothes were quite flashy. Julian found the dressing sense quite unsettling for his teenage body. Let's find our target," he murmured under his breath to let the soldiers know. They nodded and stuck together, lest someone try to pull some tricks. Julian was currently dressed in a formal suit, the fabric being of the highest quality. Every inch of his body gave off the scent of a young, rich noble, an easy prey for the natives. Seeing that she was ignored, the woman approached closer to Julian, locking his hand under her arm. The gold rankers looked for permission before yanking the woman away from Julian. But the damage was done. Julian's face turned a shade of red, his hand numb from the wild sensations. Still, Julian's acting took over. He maintained a straight face as the group made their way without stopping. Though Julian tried his level best to focus on his mission, his eyes couldn't help but divert towards unintended spots. No matter where he looked, all he could see were women in unique clothes, which did little to hide their skin. Julian took a deep breath to settle the hormones in his body, and also to divert the blood pressure from flowing to unnecessary parts. He felt like going through some mind control training at the highest levels. Julian wondered if this was the reason his boss didn't visit Natsburg, but sent him as his so-called representative. Whoever they were going to recruit today was going to be an important pillar for DX. Julian had felt proud at first for being given such a task of importance. But, seeing firsthand what the city actually offered, maybe this was what they called exploitation of labor. Spurt. Another down. I must say, hunting really is a fun thing to do. I was engrossed in killing monsters for quite some time. My strength had increased by several times. Now, killing monsters with early bronze cores had become manageable for me. It took some time to get used to the enhanced speed and strength of the monsters, but it wasn't like they were the only ones with a stronger core. I wish Julian was here. I really did. That guy must be enjoying Natsburg, and here I was, out in the wilds. The city of desires. Heh. At first, I wanted to recruit the person in that city myself, but I changed plans at the last minute. The villain, there was going to be the head of my information network. My spy, to say the least. But she wasn't someone who could be trusted. Yes, the villain was a woman. I had instructed Julian to hire her for the time being without revealing the existence of DX to her. For now, I would use her services like a normal client. And when the time comes, I knew what to do to make her submit to me completely. I couldn't rush things, not when dealing with a snake like her. A dangerous woman, but useful nonetheless. I turned towards my residence to get prepared. I had to take a nice long bath. Though I enjoyed killing, being covered in blood wasn't the best thing. I was hygienic. Arthur had sent me a message through our communication channels. The thing discovered by Alfred was something I had to see. At least Alfred felt that I could help him with his research. I had sent Arthur before because I wanted to rank up. But now, curiosity was getting the better of me. Something that made Alfred stop his research and ask for my hell assistance would surely be interesting. Cough, cough. Ugh, I coughed up some blood again. Lately, I have been coughing a lot. And not only that, but my head felt heavy from time to time. My sleep cycle had been normal. Still, I'd been suffering from constant headaches. I had shown it to the healers, but none of them could point out the exact reason. I didn't know what had happened. The headache wasn't severe every time, but I'd felt it consistently over the last few weeks. When I tried to analyze my daily activities to understand the things that could have started this issue, I just felt blanked out. It's like my brain is processing everything, and suddenly it shuts down. Literally, I felt some gaps in my memory when I tried to dig deeper. Did I hurt my head while fighting? That was what I thought every time, but that couldn't be the origin of these headaches. With my regeneration and the mana in this world, my body should have recovered from any damage done to my brain. So what could be the reason? The headache only reduced when I stopped thinking about its cause. And if I actively tried to think, it created a serious backlash. Recently, I've been tasting iron on my tongue quite frequently. The blood in my mouth was accompanied by painful headaches. Sigh. Tomorrow morning, I was leaving for Ares. The time taken for traveling between Tamyr and Ares had been reduced to almost zero due to the development of teleportation passages. This world indeed had advanced knowledge in space-related techniques. Once the deal with Alfred was done, we had begun the construction of the passage on both ends. After reaching the headquarters of Namda Academy, I was thinking of consulting Alfred about these headaches of mine. Normally, they wouldn't interfere in times of battle, but for the rest of the day, I would have to continuously go through mild pain in my head, and some sudden, death-wrecking headaches that would always appear out of nowhere. I stretched my body as the gates of Tamyr greeted me. I think I should sleep early. When is he coming? Alfred asked the red-haired man beside him. The room was filled with people dressed in white coats, noting the readings from the numerous instruments around them. I have told you for the 100th time, he was evolving his core. Arthur replied in a forced voice. He will arrive tomorrow morning. Alfred had actually asked for Kael to visit his facility, but Kael couldn't come. So Arthur came in his place. But the madman wouldn't stop asking the same question. Arthur had always been a patient man, but today his patience had been tested to its limits. Alfred wouldn't stop asking the same question. And no matter how many times he asked, Arthur's answer would be the same. Currently, they were staring at an egg and a seed before them. Something that could interest Alfred wouldn't be a normal, would it? After merging with DX, the personnel under Alfred's command had increased by several folds. And Alfred, being the researcher he was, made effective use of every last one of them. There had been several pending projects which couldn't be completed due to the lack of strong combat forces. Some were retrieval jobs, while others were focused on bringing specimens from the most dangerous places around the world. Hunting jobs. Arthur's men were fairly capable at everything, and having Lonata's huge workforce under them made their jobs much easier. Lonata did have many fighters, but most of them were below gold core. There were only a handful of gold cores and a single early platinum core. Many of them, being criminals, were a bit difficult to manage, but Arthur, being the teacher he was, had drilled discipline into each of their cores. Now, looking at these people who were feared for their crimes, one would not be able to distinguish them from some elite forces of an empire. Having a teacher really did make a difference. And someone like Arthur was a blessing for many. At least that's what Arthur thought when he was teaching these young crim students. So he found them buried in the ground. Yes, Kael observed the items before him. The soldiers had found these things deep in the ground. And how did you know that they were under that very location? I was curious. Finding something out of thin air was cool. I have developed some advanced mana scanners that react to anything above the density of mana in a diamond core. Alfred stood before me with his dead eyes. So only something above those ranks is worth enough for him to invest his time. The shell is a lot harder than what one could expect from an egg. Alfred informed me. Even without him telling me, I could feel it just by looking at the egg. It was huge. It was a little larger than the size of football. So whose egg is it? I turned my head toward Alfred, determining that would prove difficult, but Alfred paused before setting his gaze on me. It's definitely of the highest ranks, both the egg and the seed. So mythical. I asked him, if it was of the highest rank, then that only left one option to choose. Why was he being dramatic? Alfred didn't reply. A small frown had appeared on his face. I'm not sure about it. Seeing the readings, I can say with confidence that both the items aren't derived from a being of lower ranks, but their mana signatures are quite different. Honestly, I haven't observed such signatures before. They feel like they don't belong to this world. I was stumped. Not belonging to this world. It might have been possible. If I could get transmigrated here, then there was no denying the possibility of other worlds existing. But they're still mythical, right? I asked him again. The researchers nearby all had their attention on us. They might be, or something greater than that. Huh? Stop sounding mysterious, and just tell what you know. I was getting a little impatient. What do you think is the possibility of there being ranks above mythical? Alfred asked me, but it felt more like he was talking to himself. And it wasn't like I hadn't thought of that possibility before. Even in the game, there were many servers discussing such things. After progressing up to a certain point in the game, many people had indeed reached the mythical rank, but there was no progress further whatsoever. The game developers kept their silence on the matter. They would never verify any of the claims, even if they were made by popular gamers. But there were many confusing things. Like if such ranks existed, then why did no one discover these items in the game before? A discovery like this would have been phenomenal. Though the gamers might not have expertise like Alfred, it had to be noted that it was a game, and something played by millions of people. Any and all secrets should have been discovered at some point in time. I didn't reply to Alfred's question. I didn't have enough knowledge on the matter to comment about it. You didn't tell the reason for asking me to visit. Surely you weren't just going to flex your discoveries? Alfred looked at me like I had just insulted him. I didn't. Everything around us has a mana frequency. These frequencies are different for living and non-living items. Who calls living people items? A madman for sure. Not caring for my reaction, Alfred pointed toward the monitor showing different colorful lines. If you observe this graph, those were graphs. Still, they didn't look like graphs on Earth. Or was my geometry weak? No, these graphs were different. Both of these items have readings similar to those observed in living items. And not only that, but these frequencies are stronger than what should have been possible for something that is yet to be born. Alfred completed his explanation. Wouldn't that mean that whatever these items are, they're stronger than the rest? You said they were of mythical or possibly higher ranks. Was that hard to understand? Alfred just kept looking at me. Those eyes, I could never get used to them. They just felt like something out of this world. Like them. I looked at the items before me. I always knew there was something suspicious about this guy. What if I dissect him for research? Surely Alfred would agree to that. Maybe not. It means they want to be born, to live, to evolve from their current states, but they are unable to. Oh, I'm sure you have some solution for that. I shrugged my shoulders. And honestly, leaving the seed aside for the time being, if I could tame whatever beast emerged from this egg, then wouldn't I have a strong backup partner? For them to be born, they need to be fed mana essence for their cores to grow strong enough to support their bodies. In most cases, the being who births them is able to provide the required essence. I could tell where this was going. But replicating that with our current technology would not have been possible. But dash. Alfred walked toward me. Raising his hand, he stretched it in the air before. Pat on my damn head. We have you. If you could inject your mana essence into them, then there's a high chance for these pitiful things to be born. I swatted his hand away. For God's sake. Alfred wasn't disappointed and instead began rubbing his hands in anticipation. And what pitiful. They are monsters of higher rank than any of us here. Or possibly than anyone in this world. That could be dangerous. HM. I turned to look at Arthur, who interjected. He had been silent for quite some time. If what Alfred said is right, dash. I'm always right. Cough. If we take Alfred's findings into account, then feeding your mana essence could very well result in your death, in the best case. Best case. This time, it was Alfred who asked the question. There was something the madman couldn't understand. In the worst case, it could very well result in you being absorbed. What? Seeing the expression on my face, Arthur explained further. If this egg is of mythical or possibly higher rank, then the mana essence required to evolve, it would be tremendous. Right. How could I ignore such a basic thing? I should have been able to notice the danger in proceeding with Alfred's plan. Why didn't I think of it? Those headaches. The constant pain in my head seemed to have reduced my ability to process things at my usual pace. TSK. It was troublesome. But why didn't he think of that? I looked toward Alfred, who stayed silent. Sigh. It's pathetic. For someone who prides himself on his intelligence. How could I fully trust the person before me? No. Alfred wasn't a person. A monster in human skin. For him, nothing mattered except his research. In Alfred's eyes, I was just some fellow member of the organization he had joined. Nothing more than that. Heck, the guy wouldn't even hesitate before using his own blood if it meant having a lead in his discoveries. I really had to do something about these headaches. I felt like I'd become dumb. No, this was me being foolish. I had to get my act together before entering the academy. Such slip-ups at that stage could be very disastrous for my ambitions. If you provide your own essence, the egg would desire for more, and may even subconsciously try to forcefully extract it from your core. Arthur spoke in a low voice. I could feel the hostility in his words as he stared in Alfred's direction. Sensing both our gazes, Alfred just shrugged his shoulders. Well, even if you had perished, the beast emerging from that egg could very well have aided the boss in his goals. It would even have pleased him. Alfred's voice was calm. It was like he believed in what he had suggested. He thought it was the right decision. Maybe it was, but I wasn't some random member. I was the damn boss the bastard was speaking about. What good would the beast have done if I was dead to even witness its appearance? Unnecessary sacrifice. This fucker. Phew. I took a deep breath. I need to calm down. I should have known it. Dealing with this madman wouldn't be easy. That was a given. It was an oversight on my part. Collect the egg and that seed, and take them to Tamyr. Arthur nodded his head before moving to retrieve the items. Oh wait. Alfred hastily blocked Arthur's path. Arthur stopped for a brief second before looking in my direction. Do you have any issue with it? Issue? It's my discovery. And why do you want to take it? Can't you examine it here? Alfred voiced his complaint. He wasn't being so calm now, was he? Such love for his specimens. The men that brought these discoveries here. Who do they work for? Alfred went silent. The boss would be interested in your discoveries. We will feed the mana essence to these things in Tamyr. It's better suited for such things. And what's the deal in not doing it here? Alfred asked. He looked frustrated. The bastard should be glad I didn't take his head off. I swear, if he hadn't been useful for DX, even death would have feared his end. Well, I'm allergic here. I nodded my head once, and Arthur moved to collect the items before us. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't feed them the mana essence here before him. Alfred only knew about my ability to control mana essence on a superficial level, and I wanted to keep it at that. If this guy notices my ability to absorb foreign mana essence, glancing at the various bed-like structures around me, I didn't want to end up on one of these. As for the issue of the egg forcefully extracting all my essence, it was serious but manageable. I was good at multitasking. Absorbing essence from monsters and simultaneously feeding it to these items wasn't a big deal for me. I just had to be careful enough. As Arthur packed both the egg and the seed, I turned toward the area of the teleportation passage. I really didn't want to stay here a second longer. As I walked out, Alfred didn't stop us. Not like he could. He seemed dissatisfied. Not that I care. Alfred knew he could research the items once I fed them with mana essence. At the end, he was our alchemist. Our partnership was interdependent in nature. He could very well refuse to cooperate with me if I blocked his access to these specimens in the future. At least that might have been the leverage Alfred had in his mind before letting us go with his valuable discoveries. Little did he know, his refusal might very well bring him to hell. Being soft with this monster wasn't an option. I'd learned it the hard way. If Arthur hadn't stopped me from feeding my mana essence to that egg, I might very well have been dead. Still, with the level of my mana control, I didn't think it would have been possible for the egg to forcefully extract my mana essence. But my way of thinking may be biased and arrogant. Honestly, underestimating something on the mythical level wouldn't be wise. And if it was something above that level, I surely was courting my death and increased the production of the potions. You have been slacking a lot. The business had been slowing down. We need more funds. I had been soft on him, thinking of developing a good relationship. I didn't care for him, but I thought he might contribute more if he had fewer things to disturb his research. But now, there was no need to be so lax. It wasn't like I was asking too much of him. This was the deal we made, and he had to contribute on his end. Mad Alchemist, or whatever, I didn't give a shit about his reputation. A blade was sufficient enough to spill his guts out. Are you sure you want to go through? Arthur asked me. Around us were hundreds of monsters, mostly bronze cores. All of them were a step away from meeting their end. Blood pooled under their bodies as each of them writhed in pain. I had injured them just enough to stop any potential resistance, without actually killing them. My idea was simple. If I absorbed the mana essence from these monsters, and then tried to transfer it to the egg before me, it wouldn't have been the best solution. Because if the essence was absorbed into my core, it practically became my own essence. And transferring that into something of mythical rank could be disastrous. Mana essence is basically one's life essence. And if too much is drained, it could, in the best case, result in my death. So the most ideal solution that I had found by rummaging my brain was to kill these monsters while allowing their essence to flow into my body. Once it mixed with the mana in my meridians and also with my blood vessels, it would become similar to my own essence to a large extent. But instead of absorbing it into the core to fully make the foreign essence turn into my own mana essence, I would simultaneously transfer it into the egg. A perfect cycle would be formed, without draining even an ounce of my own essence. Only profits with no losses. I still think this is too risky. Arthur looked at me with concern in his eyes. His fears were valid. My plan was perfect, but only on paper. Even I didn't know what would happen once I began the process. The risk was immense, but I had to do it. I was curious about the beast in the egg, its rank, and the potential backup it could provide me. I had Arthur, a peak immortal, with me. He was the strongest card in my deck. Once I healed his core, he would continue to become even stronger. He might even reach the divine rank, something no one had ever been able to achieve. At least, that's what the history of this world narrated. But I couldn't be satisfied. I had to control this power before me. If I had something of mythical rank serving me, I would be unstoppable. And beasts had something that humans lacked. They were loyal. The type of loyalty that is etched in their blood. Arthur was loyal. I knew his character, the only reason I trusted him to be my shield and my sword. But his loyalty had limits. There might come a situation when he wouldn't protect me. Nothing was absolute. If sons could kill their father for the throne, what stopped Arthur from betraying me? Arthur wouldn't do it. He had his principles. But the future was uncertain. And most importantly, I wasn't invincible. No matter how strong I grew, no matter how many people served me, at the end of the day, a blade was enough to end my life. That was the hard truth of mortal bodies. They could be harder than rocks, but at the same time fragile as glass. And they say, betrayal always comes from the closest. It's at that very time, when you least expect it, that someone you thought was close enough would end up killing you. It's fine. Trust me. I know what's at stake. My bloody life. Though I reassured Arthur to ease his concerns, I couldn't shake the lingering hesitation in my soul. Was I afraid to die? Not quite. But that didn't mean I enjoyed getting killed. There was a difference between the two. Arthur didn't seem satisfied with my response, but he agreed nonetheless. I liked this thing about him. He would advise me when I went wrong, but wouldn't stop me if I was determined to go through with the task. Arthur knew I wasn't stupid enough to risk my life for some egg. Even I knew that. But if someone witnessed what we were doing and knew the results of failure here, they wouldn't agree with our thoughts. I indeed looked like a madman. Maybe I was. Let's begin. My voice was calm. There wasn't a hint of panic. Arthur nodded. His job was to squeeze the life out of the monsters using his mana pressure alone. I could have asked him to kill the monsters. But, in my current state, I could only absorb the mana essence of the monsters I killed with my own hands. I might be able to do the same for kills done by other people, but that may require me to upgrade my existing mana control. I didn't have the guarantee that I would be able to do it in the future. It was just a hunch, or in Arthur's words, my instinct. So Arthur would make the monsters suffocate to a near-death condition, and my work was to just apply a little bit of my own mana pressure to deal the final blow. Within seconds, a suffocating pressure descended in the area around me. I could feel every particle in the air vibrate under the immense strain it was put through. The pressure wasn't directed at me, yet I could feel a tingling sensation across my spine. It wasn't fear, but something close to that. My body just knew in whose presence I stood. The same couldn't be said for the monsters around me. The moment Arthur actively released his mana pressure, all of them were pinned to the ground. Their limbs were pressed against the ground. No, it felt more like they were being drilled into the land below them. Blood leaked from their bodies, adding to the injuries they had sustained earlier. Taking advantage of the situation, I released my own mana pressure to kill a monster near me. TSK. It didn't die. Not only that, but it didn't even feel the pressure that I had applied. Arthur had made it look easy, but it was too difficult. Arthur might have sensed my intention to kill the monster, and seeing the creature still alive. He increased his own pressure. Zing! The air vibrated again. This time, the pressure around me was far greater than before. The particles in the air that had vibrated before now seemed to collide with each other. Surprisingly, there were no sparks. When I was evolving my core, the colliding of the mana particles in the air had caused sparks to erupt, resulting in a massive fire. Maybe it was Arthur's own control. He was increasing the stress on the particles of mana suspended in the air, while at the same time ensuring that too much friction wasn't created between them. And seeing that, I was jealous. Only a little bit. I knew with time, I would be able to reach the same level of control. Still, I felt a dull ache in my chest. I was getting distracted. I waited for Arthur to keep increasing the pressure on these monsters. All the monsters around me had their tongues out of their mouths, gasping for air. They couldn't breathe, let alone mana flow. Even the flow of blood in their vessels was restricted. With every passing second, I could see the changes in their bodies. The skin of each of these monsters began to swell up from the lack of blood flow. As for the mana in their bodies, it was being suppressed to a large extent. Without being able to regulate their mana, just supporting the normal processes in their bodies might have become difficult for them. Arthur looked in my direction. I nodded. Phew. I took a deep breath and released my mana pressure again. This time, the effect was visible. Spurt. The nearest monster to me had its neck crushed with rivers of blood flowing out. As for how I was able to do that, the credit goes to Arthur. Not only was he applying pressure on the monsters to nearly kill them, but he was also concentrating his pressure on the more delicate parts of their bodies. Not only delicate, but the only parts one could cut with my own mana control. The mana essence from the dead monster began to flow into my body. It felt good. No matter what, I just couldn't get used to this feeling, the intense spike of dopamine along with the euphoria derived from it. But I still had work to do. Moving towards the egg, I gently touched it with the palm of my right hand. As the foreign mana essence from the monster got mixed with my blood, I immediately willed it to enter the egg through my right hand. There was resistance, a strong one. I could easily stop the mana essence from entering my body, but diverting its path once it entered my blood proved to be more difficult than I had imagined. But I persisted. My mana core tried its best to attract the essence in its own direction. I tried to suppress it, but it was revolting. Did my mana core have its own consciousness? No, that wasn't quite right. My core was reacting on its instincts to grow stronger, but it had to be stopped. I willed more of my control over the core, and I somehow managed to suppress it. At the end of the day, it was my own core, something that was a part of me. I didn't stop. The foreign mana essence had now nearly mixed with my blood. Its mana signature had become identical to mine, but not completely. Just enough for me to will it toward the egg. Under my control, the mana essence flowed from my hand into the surface of the egg. It crashed against the egg's hard surface. It didn't immediately enter, but continued to create friction against the shell. That was something I had seen coming. Alfred too had warned me before leaving Lonata's HQ. He did say that the egg would first try to repel the essence, as it would be vastly different from its own mana signature. But I had to keep supplying essence to the shell. With each passing moment, I could feel the resistance of the egg weakening. Well, it wasn't being weakened, but more like the egg knew what it needed the most in its current state. It's like when you're hungry, you can't avoid eating the food before you. You might try to resist the temptation at first, but your hunger would quickly surpass your will. The same thing was currently happening with the egg. The friction faced by my mana essence began to reduce, and the egg began to actively absorb the essence that I was transferring. Or more rightly to say, I was feeding it. Ugh. A brief pain passed through my body. I had underestimated the situation even after overestimating it. The rate at which the mana essence was drained from my body was unlike anything I had predicted. Within a second, about 90% of the essence absorbed from the monster was drained from my blood, with the pace increasing even further. Well, it wasn't like I was sitting idle. I had been controlling my mana pressure to kill the monsters around me. Their essence was being absorbed in my body and sent to the egg at the same time. The cycle had been established, but the speed at which the egg was draining the essence in my body was increasing with each second. More, I increased my own pace of killing the monsters. Arthur, seeing the urgency in my actions, understood the assignment. He increased his pressure again, but there was a limit to the pressure Arthur could increase without accidentally killing the monsters. Now the entire burden fell on my shoulders. I willed more of my mana to end the lives of the beasts around me. Spurt, 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 spurt. With every heartbeat, another life was extinguished. Blood began to soak the ground below, dyeing my surroundings in a darker shade of red. It was a carnage. The smell of the dead began to overwhelm my senses. But at the same time, beautiful, more. With every kill, more mana essence entered my body, while at the same time being directed into the egg near me. The cycle had now come to a standstill, with both the absorption and transfer of essence becoming nearly equal. I could feel the egg gaining its vitality. And with it, I could also feel a certain pull in my mind. It felt like something was trying to communicate with me. I glanced at the egg. Maybe it was finally awakening its identity. I didn't resist the intrusion in my mind and let the egg develop the connection between the two of us. I couldn't hear its thoughts, but I could feel its emotions. It seemed happy to be fed. It was grateful. There were a myriad of emotions that the egg conveyed, and I could also feel the pace of its absorption slowing down. The egg might have noticed the risk of blindly absorbing the essence from my body. But, keep going. I instructed the egg. Even though it was draining a lot of mana essence from my body, there were still quite a few monsters remaining. I wanted it to absorb the entirety of the mana essence that could be juiced out from their filthy bodies. And my message seemed to have reached the egg. It complied with my instruction. The egg was surprisingly docile and subservient towards me. I knew it. My choice was the best. The risk was worth the rewards. Even without being actually born, the egg was already following my wishes. It knew who it had to be grateful towards. I was the one who had made it possible for this egg to evolve and be born from its previous state. Judging from normal logic, it might have been stuck in this state for an unknown period of time, possibly spanning thousands of years, or even more. Spurt. I continued to kill the monsters left in my vicinity. Now almost all of them had been killed, with only a few breathing their last moments. I willed more of my mana control to make sure to absorb every ounce of essence that was released by these monsters upon their death. Sometimes a small part of the essence leaked into the air before being absorbed into my body. It was something beyond my control. Still, I tried my best not to waste any of the harvested essence. Spurt. Done. I absorbed the mana essence from the last monster and transferred it into the egg. As the egg absorbed the last bits of essence that I had supplied, I resisted the flow of essence going into the egg. Seeing it as a signal, the egg stopped absorbing any more essence from my body. I had succeeded. It was good that the egg cooperated with me in the end, or else I still wasn't confident enough in stopping it from forcefully absorbing my entire mana essence. The egg glowed once, and then reverted back to its original state. The mana particles in the air had also settled down. Arthur had stopped releasing his mana pressure the moment I had killed the last monster. Did it awaken? Arthur asked, approaching me. It still hasn't developed a consciousness, but I can now feel its thoughts in my mind. Not directly, but only after touching its shell. Arthur nodded at my words. And what about the seed? There's no need to do anything on that part. I replied. When my mind had formed a bond with the egg, I could feel a different connection being formed subconsciously in my mind. Though I didn't know its source, I had a fairly accurate guess. The seed and the egg are both connected in some way. I don't think we would need to supply any essence to the seed. I had a feeling that when the time came, the seed would come to life on its own. The essence it needed to sustain its evolution was being provided by the egg in ways I couldn't yet determine. There was silence between us. Neither of us spoke, but we shared the same thoughts. Anyone would be excited to have formed a connection with something that could be of mythical rank, and to have the possibility of controlling its power in the future. Thump, thump. Phoo. I let out a shallow breath to calm my beating heart. According to my analysis, I had a rough estimate. It would still take around 6 months for the being inside the egg to be born. And for all those months, I would have to provide it with mana essence on a continuous basis. The quantity would be far less compared to today's consumption. It was more like feeding the egg every day to help curb its hunger. It had been dormant for so long. By supplying it with such a tremendous amount of mana essence, I had finally awakened it to some extent. Now I just had to make sure it could sustain its current state. There was no need to provide such immense amounts of mana essence anymore, as the egg could now develop itself on its own. I only had to feed it essence continuously, without any gaps. Now all I had to do was train. I was currently at Bronze 1, though I could quickly increase my rank by killing more monsters and absorbing their essence. I didn't want to. If I resorted to the easy way, I would grow stronger, there was no doubt about that. Combined with my mana control, I could become one of the best in the entire world, but was that enough? Will I be satisfied with that? If I trained harder and made my foundation stronger cultivating like normal people, while also absorbing mana essence, I could grow to become not just one of the best, but the supreme best this world had ever seen. Being average had never been my goal. The enemies I would make as X would be magnitudes stronger than me. None of my fights would be easy, so there was no chance in hell I was going to take the easy way out. A year and a half. I was waiting for my academy life to begin. Did you pack the clothes? Yes, but I didn't find the red ones. What? I told you to sort them out before. Two maids could be seen packing up luxurious pairs of clothes. I did. The younger maid pouted. The room they were in was a large room with a king-size bed in the center, surrounded by decorations of varied types. The windows were just open enough to let the sun peek through, the calm waves of the cool wind crashing against the curtains. Every inch of the room screamed wealth, something which very few could afford. And the Frosts were one of them. Surely young miss wouldn't mind a cloth or two missing. The young maid tried to defend herself, but her pitiful attempts were met with a smack. Ouch. What was that for? Rubbing her head, she looked at her senior with teary eyes. Young miss may be benevolent, but that doesn't mean you should slack off on your duties. Smack. Getting another hit on the back of her head seemed to have stopped her resistance. The young one looked at her senior with moist eyes, trying to gain sympathy, but failed miserably. The young miss they were talking about was none other than the youngest child, Alicia Frost. Similar things were happening all over the Frost mansion, with the maids running through the hallways, trying their best to complete the tasks at hand. Today was the day when the gates of the most prestigious academy on the planet were opened for new admissions. A new year had begun, with the entrance tests of the academy being scheduled for today. However, these tests were a ticket to the academy for the commoners, while the influential noble houses across the world had their own quota to send a selected number of their students to get admitted to the academy. The test was to determine the initial rankings of the new recruits. The interesting part being that these tests were a bonus examination for the nobles who were already admitted to the academy. The commoners applying for the academy had to get a score above certain points determined by the academy. If they passed the minimum threshold, they would become eligible to get selected for the academy. Only eligible, not a guaranteed selection. Even among the past candidates, only the top students would be selected, as the quota of students that could get admitted to the academy through these tests kept on changing each year. So it depended on the luck of these recruits if the quota was higher than the previous years. If not, then they could only blame their origins. That was how the world worked. This system wasn't invented for charity. No, it was for filtering the best talents among the masses and providing for their education. Though Namda Academy was wealthy by its own standards, it couldn't simply fund the education of all the students who were applying for admission. Hence, only a finite number of students among the commoners were admitted every year. This year was going to be the same. Alicia, being from the Frost Dukedom, had already been admitted to the academy along with her brother, Kevin. There was a general rule that only students who had turned 18 could apply for admissions. Though Alicia and Kevin were 17 years old and still had a year before turning 18, being Frost came with its own set of benefits. Not only that, but both siblings were monstrous talents for their young age. Hence, getting admitted wasn't against the rules entirely. Some exceptions were made every year. Aren't they being late? Alia kept looking at the watch in her hand, with impatience written all over her face. Calm down, it's going to be fine. They're not going to travel by foot. They have a teleportation passage here, Castor said in his calm, yet commanding voice. But it didn't seem to have eased her worries, as Alia kept pacing back and forth. Currently, both the Duke and the Duchess were waiting near the teleportation passage for their children to arrive. Today was their entrance test, which had only an hour left before it began. Not quite. It was an entrance test for the commoners, but for the Frosts, it was just a test to rank them in the academy. Missing the test wouldn't do much harm, but being a Frost came with its own set of expectations. Both Kevin and Alicia had to rank among the top students to maintain the dominance of the Frosts in every place they had set their foot in. And it wasn't difficult for either of them. Both siblings were once-in-a-generation talents, being admitted a year earlier to the academy. At first, Alia was against the idea of enrolling them until they turned 18. She wanted her children to enjoy their lives before being burdened with the expectations of the dukedom. She didn't want them to be crushed under the pressure of being a Frost. A 15-year-old child's face came to her mind. It had been 3 years since the incident that day. Remembering the past brought bitter memories and a regret so huge that no shoulders could bear. Seeing the sudden, downcast expression on his wife's face, Castor seemed to have come to an understanding. He placed a hand on Alia's shoulder and gently squeezed it as a gesture of comfort. Castor didn't know what to say. He had no words. Before being a father, He was a duke of the Veltran Empire, and considering that, he still couldn't forgive Kael's outrageous behavior. But he couldn't say his thoughts to his wife and make her more upset than she already was. Did Castor have regret for how he treated Kael? That was something only Castor knew. But one thing was sure, Alia regretted every word she had said at that banquet. She knew it would break Kael, but had never anticipated the full extent of the damage it could do. Since Kael left the banquet 3 years ago, Alia had sent several people in search of him to bring him back. But to her dismay, she didn't find him anywhere. It was surprising that so many people couldn't discover a single kid in their own empire. Alia wanted to make an empire-wide or possibly worldwide official announcement in search of Kael, but Castor stopped her from doing it. He didn't want the empire to think that he had forgiven Kael for his disrespect towards the Veltran royal family. Also, making such an announcement would make them look weaker in the eyes of their enemies. For Castor, showing such weakness was unforgivable. The only saving grace was that, through some methods exclusive to the noble houses, they knew that Kael was still alive. That was the only thing that had kept Alia stable till date. Otherwise, she would have broken down a long time ago. As Kael had not returned to the mansion for all these years, Alia had taken that as a sign of his refusal to meet them, and that thought had made her stop all her efforts to search for him. She still didn't know how Kael was able to stay hidden despite being searched for by some of the most elite people in the world. There were no traces of him to be found anywhere. It was like he had disappeared from existence. This was something that had taken Castor's attention. Usually, he wouldn't add anything to the efforts made by Alia to search for their son. Not only that, but he wasn't even interested in any findings related to him. Many thought Castor simply didn't care for a road child. One day, while talking about some important matters related to the dukedom, one of Castor's loyal followers informed him about the results of the findings. And hearing about them made Castor suspicious. For Kael to stay hidden from people professional in their field of tracking someone was helping Kael, and clearly it was someone strong. It had to be noted that the means available at the hands of the Frost to search for an individual were so high level that no one under the immortal rank could avoid detection. At the immortal and higher ranks, a person practically merged with nature itself, which made searching or spying on such individuals much more difficult and nearly impossible for most powerhouses. So the person or the entity behind Kael, was it a plot against the Frost, using his son against him? It was a standard strategy which many people employed to weaken their enemies before going for the real strike. Still, Castor didn't fully believe his own theory. The people sent to track Kael were indeed elites, but they weren't the best that the Frost had. The absolute best were under Castor's command, and neither Alia nor any of the other Frosts could use them. Alia knew that, and she tried to manage everything with the power she had at her disposal. At the end of the day, she respected her husband. Though not using the full extent of the power under the Frosts, Castor had still allowed her to search for Kael using basic, primitive means. And Alia was satisfied with that. At least she had to be content with the current situation when she felt that her son had no desire to return seeing him go to the extent of keeping himself hidden from them for all these years. Look up, they have arrived. Castor's words brought Alia back to reality. 2 individuals could be seen approaching them. Be quick, the exam will start soon. Alia waved her hand, urging them to hurry. Castor just sighed in response. As the youngsters approached the teleportation passage, Alia stepped forward to hug the blonde girl before her. Alicia reciprocated the gesture with a faint smile. Kevin stood at his place, bowing a little in the direction of his father. Castor replied with a small nod. Kevin had the same signature features of the Frost black hair and an even darker shade of black eyes complementing them. Alicia, on the other hand, was the only one among the Frost youngsters who had blonde hair like her mother. She did inherit the black eyes of the Frosts, but her hair made Castor name her after Alia. Alicia the word had the same warm feeling for Castor as did the name of his wife. Did you pack everything? Alia asked. Before Alicia could speak, keep your distance from other boys. And tell Kevin if you need anything. I had asked Victoria to help the 2 of you, but still take care of yourself. And Dash. Yes, mother, I get that. I'm not a child, so stop nitpicking about everything. Alicia knew her mother's list of advice wouldn't end anytime soon, so she had to take the initiative. Kevin didn't interrupt their conversation. One part being that he wanted Alicia to bid a proper farewell, and the other, Kevin didn't want to attract the never-ending be careful attention of his mother. Castor, just like Kevin, waited patiently for Alia to end her farewell. Hearing Alicia's not-so-loving reply, Alia gave a small pout before focusing her attention on Kevin. Kevin had a neutral expression on his face. You 2 be careful of the girls there. I had heard they even drug young lords and Dash. I will remember it, mother. And how about we leave for the academy now? Surely you don't want us to be late for the test. Hearing about the test, Alia returned to her previous demeanor. Why hasn't the passage been started yet? And you 2, add some punctuality to your schedules. How can someone be so late on such an important day? There's still an hour left, was what everyone wanted to say, but the words were stuck in their throats, never leaving their mouths. No one wanted to start another lecture before even the academy began. Kevin regretted mentioning the test. He tried his best to ignore Alicia's gaze, which didn't seem to end anytime soon. Question, sets 100 credits. A seller with shiny new clothes held a banner advertising his shop. For guaranteed admissions, visit us. Another shouted. Really? One student chimed in. What's the price? Are you from staff? A petite girl asked. Wait, I have seen him before. Wasn't he at the admissions there? What was the name? Agadash. Buy your future for only 200 credits. An ambitious seller proudly shouted with a smirk on his not-so-good face. Well, you heard that. A crowd began forming around the shop. Nah, that's a scam. One student barked. Then why are you going there? Can you do it for 180 credits? Hey, answer me. You said it was a scam. Let me take the fall. You just focus on the test, my friend. Huh. Okay, thanks, I guess. 190, last price. No negotiation. 185. The seller didn't budge. Tisk, take 189. Sure. Here, take the questions. Greedy bastard. And will they appear in the exams? High probability. How much? The seller raised his index finger. The nearby students all had a shocked expression. 100%? Are you kidding me? I want it too. No, meh. Here, take the full price. Give me 250 credits. Damn, he's rich. Nah, just stupid. 250 credits, deal done. Here, your future. So the probability's 100%, right? No, the seller said. 10%. The seller shook his head. 1%. Another asked hopefully. 0.1%. The seller puffed his chest. Refunds. This scammer. I told you. Then why did you buy? Similar things were happening all over the market. Students had filled the entire area, moving towards the gates of the academy. The entire city of Namda was owned by the academy. Namda Academy, the top institute in the entire world, built as a sign of peace among the various races living on the planet. They say peace is achieved through strength, and that was what Namda actually signified. Achieving strength. The best instructors across the world worked here. They were elites in their respective fields, with rivals that could be counted on fingers. And even those rivals taught here, so the quality wasn't even a thing to be mentioned. Known as the Academy of the World, the city of Namda had received donations from all major powerhouses to sustain its economy. The result being it had prospered to become one of the most developed cities in the entire world. Even the capital cities of many empires couldn't rival the majesty of this place, where the future was trained. Every major powerhouse always sent their heirs to learn at this very place. This land was where the leaders of the future mingled with their subjects, treated as equals within the grounds of the Academy's jurisdiction. And no single power, irrespective of their status in the world, could pressure any of the staff here into conducting acts of nepotism. No matter the situation, the Namda Academy never bowed before anyone. Each powerhouse kept the others in check by ensuring fairness at this institute. But even in the case that any major powerhouse tried to influence the atmosphere here, they would be met with retaliation irrespective of the level of their crime. A permanent ban on their entire bloodline, prohibiting them from being admitted here ever again. And no one wanted to deprive their heirs of learning at such a premium institute. Every powerhouse, even the small noble houses, had their own teaching institutes, but for obvious reasons, none could compete with the level of training that Namda provided to each of its students. Also, the connections that could be formed here had more value than any other alliance made outside the bounds of the academy. The bond that could be forged here was irreplaceable. And that was the reason every noble house wanted their children to expand their influence, make more connections, and make their house even stronger once they inherited their respective thrones. The market was currently filled with commoners, preparing their best for the test. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for every single one of them. If they got admitted, then they could learn at the best place with almost zero cost. A life changer for many. No, all of them. Even if they didn't get admitted to the academy and just passed the entrance test. That itself was a huge achievement. Many other academies across the world use these tests as criteria for their own admissions. And passing the test, even if barely on the line, meant direct admission to other academies which might be ranked lower but were some of the best academies nonetheless. Scoring the basic marks to become eligible in itself meant having vast talent compared to the masses. Even though Namda didn't select all these students, other academies provided them with attractive scholarships to join them. Many noble houses closely observed these tests to recruit potential talents from the masses. The tests were also a sort of entertainment for nobles across the world, betting on the best talents they could find. A sort of gambling den. The cost to sponsor talents among the commoners who passed the entrance test but didn't get selected was minimal for the nobles. Other academies didn't have the same ridiculous fees as Namda, as the resources they could provide students were equally insignificant compared to Namda's resource muscles. Each and every facility of the Namda Academy was top tier in the entire world, with massive funds poured in to develop every inch of the academy. A huge crowd had now formed outside the gates of the academy, with students waiting to enter what many called the sacred grounds. There was still a minute left for the test to begin. Whoa, this academy really is huge. A student with a slim but athletic build commented, standing before the gates of the institute he had always dreamed of attending. The nearby students all gave him a brief glance, his childlike, innocent yet positive energy elevating their moods. All the best, everyone. The student spoke in a high-pitched voice, seeing the numerous people staring at him. No one replied to him, but each of them felt their hearts lighter just hearing his voice. The youth had black hair with some white shades in between. He stood at around 6 feet, with his hair falling over his forehead. Noah had always been a curious child. When he saw something, the first set of actions would be to understand the mechanics behind its functioning. The only thing that ever hindered his curious nature was his situation. Born as a commoner, Noah had been raised in an orphanage. He didn't remember who his parents were, or whether he was even a commoner. Noah had always wanted to find out about his parents, since the time he could think for himself. But the people around him had every time advised Noah against doing something that risky. The risks that people talked about were real in many cases. Many times, nobles had illegitimate children, whom they mostly abandoned near some orphanage or a place that could look after their child. Even though the nobles were cruel, no one could be so inhumane as to kill a child just because he was born from an illegitimate relationship. Still, that sympathy didn't extend to raising the children in their own homes, afraid of what people would think. And if that very child later tried to search for his origins, then the results were obvious. He would be silenced by the very people who had birthed him not out of hate, but simply due to the fear of humiliation they might suffer. That was the reason all the orphanages across the empire were funded by many noble houses and people with positions of power. Still, that didn't necessarily mean that Noah was an illegitimate child of some noble. It was just an assumption and a reasoning based on probability. But taking that risk wasn't worth the reward for many. In most cases, the children in orphanages belonged to accidents that happened in the red light districts of the empire. It was something that had been going on for ages since civilizations had been formed. So all these children were raised at these places till they turned old enough to look after themselves. After all, no matter how much funds an orphanage received, it was nearly impossible to look after every kid for their entire lifetime. Hearing about all the risks that people talked about made Noah a little scared to search for his real parents. He wasn't scared of getting killed. No, the thing Noah feared the most was being killed by the people who brought him into this world. For a positive child like him, seeing such a dark side of reality was something he knew he wouldn't be able to bear. So for the entirety of his childhood, Noah curbed his feelings of reunion and tried to divert his attention to other things. That was what sparked his curiosity in learning more about this world. Noah was born with an iron core, which meant he would be able to cultivate in the future. That itself opened several doors of opportunity for him. It also made the staff at the orphanage treat him with more care than others. Even though having an iron core didn't necessarily mean that the person would continue to grow stronger in his life and keep achieving higher ranks. That wasn't practical, but it did mean that the person could at least achieve a decent status in his life. No matter the place, soldiers were respected everywhere, at least in most places. And if Noah managed to evolve his core into the bronze rank, it meant he could, at the bare minimum, enter the ranks of a foot soldier. That in itself was a great thing. And the other reason was the intelligence that Noah displayed since childhood. That made many people believe in his potential. So having a decent relationship with such a person was a good investment for many. When Noah turned 10 years of age, there had been a visit by some military personnel for basic military training and possible recruitment among the older children in the orphanage. This was a common practice among many militaries across the world. The best way to recruit expendable soldiers was by recruiting children who had no home to return to. That made them more loyal and also reduced the fear of death, because once you had no one to look after, you became much more capable and lethal. As they say, never fight someone who has nothing to lose. It was brutal but effective. When the military personnel were busy evaluating the older children in the orphanage through live combat, Noah decided to try it for himself. Though the soldiers had reservations about letting a child fight, it wasn't like he would die from it. So Noah had been allowed. And the results, well, that day, Noah himself understood what type of monster he was. The drive to fight was something that was ingrained in every living creature, but to make the most use of that instinct was something that only a finite number of people could do, that too with proper training. But there are always some monsters in the world who have that instinct in their blood since the moment they are born. The instinct of combat. These individuals are adept in combat without any special training. They're just so attuned to killing that it feels like second nature to them. And once they are given education in the arts of combat, these people go on to become the greatest warriors history has ever seen. And Noah was just one of them. Obviously, being a 10-year-old kid with little to no proper nutrition, Noah's body wasn't the best for combat. That was the only reason he was able to display only a % of his true combat abilities. But that % was enough for the recruiters to understand the potential this child had. Noah not only won, but owned all the fights, dominating them like a seasoned pro. His presence made it feel like the swords were made just to be wielded by him. This was Noah, the game's protagonist. Noah's potential made the Empire sponsor him till date. Of course, what the soldiers had seen was only a % of Noah's true abilities. The ones who had come for the recruitment weren't high-ranked people, but ordinary soldiers. Hence, they couldn't fully evaluate the gem before them. That led to Noah receiving support from the Empire, but not something that was meant for the elites. What Noah received was the bare minimum credits for him to live comfortably till he completed his formal education. He had indeed been added to the list of youths with enough potential to contribute sufficiently to the Empire. Now, standing before the gates of Namda Academy, Noah felt an inexplicable sense of joy. Having the chance to learn here was something he had been looking forward to since the day he had heard about this institute. With a minute left for the entrance test to begin, the gates of the academy opened for the students to get a glimpse of its majesty. The area on the other side of the gates felt like heaven for all commoners. A man in a formal suit stepped out from within, with rows of students flanking him from either side. "Looks like everyone is here," The man spoke in a calm tone, slightly adjusting his spectacles. The students accompanying him silently observed the applicants before them. You all will be assessed in theory and practical tests. All the candidates present for the test, listen carefully. The instruction wasn't new and was something similar for all the entrance tests since the academy was founded. You don't have to worry about not having a formal education to pass these tests. They are designed keeping in mind that many of you, or to say, most of you, are still not proficient enough in combat to be judged thoroughly. The examiner spoke to relieve the students of their fear. Both the theory and practical tests will assess your potential and then rank you according to it. So be free and try to attempt both with the best of your abilities. The examiner then looked at the students who had followed him from within the academy gates. These here are your seniors at the academy. He pointed towards either side. If you have any difficulty understanding the processes further down the lane, you may seek their advice. Saying that, he motioned with his hand for the gates to fully open. You all may now enter. The academy wishes you the best. Hearing the instructions, the applicants' commoners, as well as the nobles who had already been admitted to the academy, began to enter through the gates. For the commoners, this was a battle of their lives, while the nobles had their nerves stretched to rank better than their peers. Everyone was fighting their own battles. Noah followed everyone and, with a wide smile on his face, made his way into his new home. Hey, Ori, will it be all right? Hope so, Mori. Two students made their way towards their designated location for the practical test. As for the theory test, a total of 50 questions were asked, with most of them being related to mana. There were many real-life situational questions, with the candidates being evaluated on the basis of their thought process. For the practical test, each student was going to be tested individually on various parameters. The twins were commoners who had arrived here to try their luck. Yes, luck. Though both of them had prepared thoroughly for the exams with the meager resources that they had, passing these tests was a matter of luck for them. It was too good an opportunity to pass, while at the same time, the twins knew their limits. Being from a commoner background and getting admitted here without having monstrous talent wasn't possible for either of them. They were talented, but that was by the standards of their village. An instructor there had suggested they attempt the entrance tests at Namda Academy. Though they had arrived with high hopes, just seeing the number of students attending the entrance test crushed any expectation of being selected. But now, they couldn't back off either. The entirety of the test area was divided into two sections, with nobles attending the test to get ranked, while the commoners had their own separate area. This was done to reduce the possibility of conflicts among the two groups. Many nobles thought of commoners as lesser beings who didn't have the right to stand in their presence. This led to the commoners being treated like trash. Though that was the reality of the world, here at the academy, everyone was a student irrespective of their background. If the nobles participated in the test along with the commoners, it could lead many students to perform below their actual capabilities due to numerous reasons. Fear being a prime one. The fear of not being born with noble blood. Such things developed an inferiority complex in many, and the academy wanted to retain the best talents among the masses. So, allowing them to be free of any social injustice, at least on academy grounds, was the motive behind separating the areas. Candidate Ori and Candidate Mori, you may proceed now. The staff present made the announcement for the next batch of applicants. Let's go, bro. Ori tried to speak in a cheerful tone. As the twins made their way towards the test area, they were asked to enter their respective rooms. Ori stood near room 21, while Mori was allotted room 22. Taking a deep breath, Ori entered the room. The instructor inside gave him a brief glance before explaining the rules. Choose any of those weapons. You can attack me however you see fit. There are no extra rules. You will be evaluated on the basis of your situational awareness and battle prowess. Ori tensed upon hearing that. The instructor at the gate had informed them that the tests would judge their potential, keeping in mind that many of them weren't versed in combat. But here this guy was asking him to fight. The instructor, not caring for his thoughts, motioned for Ori to begin. Ori looked at the weapons on display. There were all sorts from daggers and short swords to heavy swords. He decided to choose a slim sword, not that he could wield it, but felt the easiest. Taking a deep breath, he charged towards the instructor like a wild beast. At least, that's what it looked like to the ones viewing the test through screens, taking notes of every detail. How does one advance on the path to power? The question was simple, but the answer, it was subjective. There were several ways to increase one's power. A known fact. But were all these ways secure? Again, it was a subjective answer. If looked at closely, how could there be only one way to make oneself stronger? Everyone doesn't eat the same food, nor does every creature share the same anatomy. Every creature has different systems inbuilt into their bodies that help them grow. Even if you compare two similar creatures like humans and vampires, both walk on two legs and have mostly similar body structures, but vampires can grow stronger by feeding on the blood of other living beings. Humans don't have the same ability, but they are considered more adaptable than vampires. The adaptability of humans has made them one of the strongest species on the planet, despite being inherently weak. Human bodies are so fragile that they have to work to death just to match the physical abilities that other races are blessed with from birth. It may sound unfair, but there's always a balancing factor in the world. Humans are weak but adaptable, while vampires are strong but dependent on others for their survival. Elves, on the other hand, have greater control over the mana and nature, but in return are cursed with weaker bodies. Dwarves have the strongest and sturdiest physiques, but are restrained by their height, and in most cases, their desires. They are the only race with the lowest self-restraint. Always engaged in drinking and free-willed by nature, this had resulted in their entire race being reduced to nothing but blacksmiths. Though they excel at their profession, they lost their advantage due to their mental weaknesses. So if even similar-looking creatures are so vastly different, then what makes it so that every living being on this planet has to follow the same method while walking the path to greater power? If the facts are analyzed, then increasing one's power through constant cultivation by absorbing the mana in the surroundings was the best and most secure option the world had till today. Constantly putting your body through combat to tire it out, and then replenishing the damage done to the body through mana absorption, this was the only method that could help one increase their core ranks safely. But how do monsters grow stronger? Do they also cultivate like humans and other races? These questions still hadn't been answered. Many scientists throughout history had tried to study cultivation patterns in monsters, but nothing of value could be found. Monsters at lower ranks evolve simply by consuming other creatures. This was the only method discovered through all the research done till date. But this method was found to be used by monsters only till the diamond rank. Monsters of higher ranks couldn't be caught and studied. Those were living calamities that brought only death and destruction. Meeting one meant you either had to kill it or surrender yourself to the embrace of death. To study a monster, one had to overpower it, then develop a cage strong enough to contain such a calamity. Even after going through all that, researching them was near impossible, as monsters could easily snuff out the lives of researchers with mere power. Just a bit of their bloodlust was enough. So till date, the truth behind the cultivation of higher-ranked monsters remained an unsolved mystery. Still, that didn't deter the intelligent races from discovering more ways to increase their power. Dark magic, cannibalism, organ transfer had been many methods found to be useful enough to increase one's power. But at the end of the day, most of them were labeled unethical and banned in all empires across the planet. That only left the basic cultivation method available to all. It wasn't like the method itself was bad or ineffective. It was just slow. One had to train for years to increase their core ranks, and only people with enough talent could aim for higher forms of power. Even then, it became increasingly difficult for even the most gifted geniuses to progress further as they reached higher core ranks. Still, being the only known safe way to cultivate left people with no choice. This was the major reason cultivators were respected so much. Even reaching the bronze core was considered elite by many. Heck, having an iron core itself was a sign of being blessed. So one could just imagine reaching even higher rank silver, gold, platinum. Each rank was accompanied by an insane boost in strength, along with money, respect, and social power. People with platinum and above ranks were considered demigods by many. And an immortal was not just considered one, but such an entity was the very definition of a god. Immortal, someone who had surpassed the limits of being immortal. These individuals could live for hundreds of years, provided they weren't killed by other powerhouses of the world. And what made them immortal? Cultivation till the diamond rank followed one simple rule: you trained your body to its limits, and then cultivated through mana absorption from the surroundings. This wasn't easy, but it was simple. You just had to repeat the same set of actions, and the result would be your power increasing by tiny amounts every time you cultivated. Then, at some point, all these tiny power-ups would merge and make you capable of evolving to the next rank. But this method was limited till reaching the diamond core. At that rank, one had to form 6 mana rings around their mana core, reaching tier 6 of the diamond rank. Reaching this level was, in itself, an enormous challenge. But even if they reached it, the path further was even brutal. The people at such level of strength were wise enough to know their limits. That was why many individuals at the peak of the diamond rank never ranked up. They simply didn't have the courage to face the wall before them. The wall to immortality. What did it mean to become truly immortal? Immortality was a myth. There was no such thing as true immortality. Anything that had a beginning would have an end. That was the rule of creation and destruction. A law of nature. Even the gods had to follow it. Becoming an immortal didn't make a creature invincible, but it did make them hard to kill. When evolving one's core from the peak of the diamond rank to the immortal rank, the basic process stayed the same. It involved making tiny cracks appear on the surface of the core, using mana pressure from within and outside the core. Then, those cracks had to be filled with mana, and the core had to be compressed again for it to evolve into the next rank. That was what could be called the standard foundational procedure. The only difference was that while ranking up to immortal, one had to become one with nature during this process. And what did that mean? When the core was compressed to its maximum extent, with cracks appearing throughout its surface, instead of directly patching those cracks, a new step had to be added. The person had to open all the meridians in his body in the literal sense. One had to tear apart every cell on the skin and make the mana meridians come into direct contact with the mana in nature. The mana was not to be converted while being absorbed in the meridians. No, the mana in nature had to directly enter the meridians without going through the absorption process, and that was done by tearing apart those meridians. Micro tears had to be made in all the meridians to make it possible for the surrounding mana to enter the mana core in its purest and most natural form. This step itself could cause a slow, painful death for many. Tearing apart the skin cells alone could lead to severe bleeding, resulting in massive blood loss. Though people at the peak of the diamond rank had higher self-healing powers, those powers had to keep up with the destruction of the body. And not only that, the damaged cells couldn't be repaired until the entire process of ranking up was finished. So even if you could heal the damage done to the body, you still had to survive until the entire procedure was completed. And while surviving, you had to have enough willpower to actually control your body while going through the agonizing pain of tearing your skin apart. This was still only the primary pain. Causing micro tears in your meridians resulted in another round of intense pain. Pain might be an understated word for the brutality your body went through. And even if someone could survive all that pain and suffering, being able to actually control their meridians well enough to create micro tears without completely breaking them was a challenge for many. Not exactly a challenge, but a near impossible task. If a cultivator managed to pass these steps, he then had to make the mana enter his core through the cracks. It had to be noted that the normal process involved the mana core absorbing mana through the meridians, but here, the purest form of natural mana directly entered the core not through absorption, but through the damage sustained by the core. This made the mana essence within the core unstable, as the foreign mana directly crashed with one's own mana signature. It was like pollution entering the system. The mana core naturally tried to repel this mana, but the cultivator had to stop that repulsion. He had to make his mana essence learn to coexist with the natural mana and then evolve his core, thereby becoming one with nature. Well, there are still a few steps in between, but I would keep them aside for now. The reason I was remembering all these details was, according to my guess, I had scored pretty well in the tests, both the theory and the practical examination. And my identity wasn't a simple one either. The disappointment of the Frost Dukedom, the spoiled noble brat. There were many names attached to my identity. And here I was, appearing out of nowhere, giving the entrance test through the commoner section and becoming eligible for admission into the academy. Not only eligible, but I seemed to have passed with flying colors. It must have been suspicious for the academy staff for an utter failure of a noble brat to display the level of competence I had shown. The theory exam had questions heavily related to mana. To answer them, one didn't have to know the official concepts, but simply describe the sensations they felt when interacting with mana in different situations. And for someone like me, whose mana control was unparalleled not only among people of my rank, but in the entire world, well, the test wasn't even worth my attention. As for the practical exam, sigh. My opponent was an academy instructor, and in turn, I guess, being at Silver 2, the guy wasn't even worth lifting my blade against. From the hellish training I had undergone under Arthur, my body had become like a living weapon. Even creatures at my own rank couldn't defeat me. So is there any reason I would lose to someone a tier below me? Yes, in the last year, I had ranked up to become a Silver Core cultivator. I was at Silver 3 at the moment, with my core already showing signs of wanting to evolve to the next rank. But I had suppressed that desire for now. As for the result of that fight, it felt more like I was the one assessing the person before me. I had beaten him with my bare hands, teaching him to improve his techniques during the fight. Maybe that was insulting to him, as the guy became more brutal in his ways of attacking me. And I wasn't someone who could back off. I had to thrash him a few times before knocking him off. That display, along with everything else, seemed to have attracted the attention of the headmaster. The sins of being strong. I was escorted by an instructor through the long hallways of the academy. The structure was quite confusing for me. My actions so far hadn't been the most refined. The headmaster had requested to talk with me. Well, it was more of an order. But let's keep the minor details aside. Immortal rank was something that elevated people to the status of a god. Everyone desired such power, but most weren't even capable of witnessing its might. Becoming an immortal was like surpassing the limits of death placed on your body. Achieving such a rank was itself considered being in the top brass of the world. An immortal was an existence whose words couldn't be ignored. No matter the powerhouse, everyone had to respect such an individual irrespective of their affiliations or race. Most of the individuals that had reached the immortal rank were undying monsters who belonged to eras long forgotten. Some, like Arthur, were exceptions, individuals who had managed to reach godhood in the early years of their life. So if a being like an immortal was something that couldn't be ignored, then what about the rank above it? There were a handful of individuals who stood above these undying immortal monsters. The sovereigns. If the condition for becoming an immortal was becoming one with nature, then achieving the rank of a sovereign meant making nature one with them. It might feel the same, but the actual difference was greater than heaven and hell. When you become an immortal, the mana essence in your core learns to coexist with the mana in nature. Your body keeps on inhaling mana from the surroundings, similar to how you breathe. The mana enters your body subconsciously without any active, forceful absorption, and then keeps on sustaining your body. That is why the mana available at the disposal of immortals always feels infinite, as their bodies keep replenishing their mana reserved from the surrounding mana, without the individual having to actively do anything. The mechanism behind the power of immortals is more complex, but this is the basic process that follows through every second an immortal lives their life. For a simpler comparison, in the case of an immortal, their relationship with nature is one of mutual coexistence, in which power is shared between them. It's like the immortal has permission to access the laws of nature, while nature uses the immortals to purify its own mana in ways only immortals know. In the case of a sovereign, nature is no longer an equal partner. The sovereigns do not coexist with nature. Nature exists for them. A contradicting statement indeed. How can the world, the thing on which all creatures are born, exist for its own creations? The core of a sovereign becomes the anchor for the world to exist upon. When Jotun had been formed, it wasn't the mighty world that it was today. Jotun was just a planet with land and water, a place where even an earthquake could destroy the very ecosystem. So how could such a weak planet support the lives of beings who had long surpassed the limitations of their bodies? Jotun at first couldn't support fights between diamond rankers, let alone immortals. Every time such a fight occurred, it brought the planet closer to its demise. Until the first immortal was born. The immortals made use of nature, and in return, the nature used them to increase the density and purity of its own mana to support sturdier landscapes. But the problem wasn't resolved. When more immortals were born, conflict between them was inevitable. And when the first of such conflicts took place, the lands were broken apart by the tremors caused by the fight between the gods. The seas were split open, with the inner core of the planet coming undone. These broken lands evolved to become the continents of the present world. The fights never stopped, nor did the destruction of the planet. But as the years passed, every powerhouse realized the consequences of their actions, resulting in a temporary global peace. Still, the damage was done. After years of wars, the planet was on its last brink, with everything breaking apart. Then it happened. Through some miracle, a monster at the immortal rank evolved, and as such, the world gained its first sovereign. The birth of the sovereign stabilized the planet. The planet, realizing the solution to its current state, made a subconscious decision. The day the sovereign was born was the day it disappeared from the face of the world. It was absorbed by the planet, and the first anchor was created. The core of the monster became the central anchor upon which the planet of Jotun rebuilt itself. It was a slap in the faces of the other intelligent races, as a monster something they considered beneath them was the first to surpass them. Every immortal had the flame of greed burning within them, the desire to rank up, to achieve power beyond their current limits, but they were scared to be absorbed by the world. For ages, this fear stopped anyone from ranking up. The planet had now mostly stabilized itself and was stronger than ever before. The fights between immortals no longer had the same effect on it as before. Seeing what the power of a sovereign could do, the fear in the minds of many washed away. Thus began the race to evolve. After centuries of effort, sovereigns were born among the various races, including monsters. As the world had already stabilized, none of the newly born sovereigns were absorbed into the planet's core like before. All these sovereigns now became the new anchors of the world, or rather, external anchors that supported the central anchor. Hence, a strong framework was formed, and Jotun evolved once again to become what it is today. The sovereign's cores were the anchors that held nature in place. Immortals had to align themselves with the rules of nature, while sovereigns, they became the rules themselves. And here I was on my way to meet one such existence. The headmaster of Namda Academy, Nemur Daithra.